Well, the Planning Commission has like a really unfortunate, I think, like anti-city kind of bias. Like there was actually an example at the Planning Commission 2 weeks ago where a gentleman literally said, and I'm almost quoting verbatim, that he doesn't care what the city of Tampa says or thinks about issues. He's going to vote the way that
This is someone
he thinks
on the board?
on the Planning Commission board. And it's just
Jesus.
shocking to me, like the level of disrespect that like our elected officials get, because obviously they're the closest representatives to us in terms of what we want in our land use.
Yeah.
For somebody on the Planning Commission to just say, I don't care what the city of Tampa and city council has to say about issues that are closest to them, it's just another example of something you were talking about with Alan. It's just the disrespect we get from the county and other powers that be, despite the fact that we are the economic engine that drives all of this.
Well, that whole deal with offered transportation and the money coming back to Hillsborough County, how much did they collect? Like 500 plus million.
I think it was like almost 600. Yeah.
I think the city's only getting from that, it's like 21 million.
David, pull up that council meeting last week. Try to find it, because Clinton had said it really beautifully.
Yeah,
I mean, he basically just said like our
theft.
pockets have been picked. It was kind of crazy.
I mean, people like, several attorneys, local attorneys, made mass fortunes off of public money that was excised for the specific purpose of trying to make it easier for working class people to get to and from where they live, work, and play here in our community. And instead, a whole lot of grifters, frankly, got very, very rich off of our money that was supposed to be used to help our community, whether you agreed with the tax or not.
Yeah.
Well, I think what frustrated me is there was plenty of time to file lawsuits before the ballot initiative ever went to voters, right? Nobody mentioned one iota that they thought it was unconstitutional or not abiding by state law until they lost. And then all of a sudden, once they lost, because the reality is they didn't think it was going to pass, because every other time it's been up for ballot, it hasn't passed. So it's kind of this retroactive thing where it's like, oh, it's unconstitutional because it wins. And, I think the idea that a charter rule county can't have a ballot initiative that instructs the duly elected representatives in terms of how to allocate money is absurd. It's absolutely absurd. I mean, think about this.
I think
HART and PSTA have dedicated mills.
No, this is sidewalks. You can see on the bottom
It
right.
might be the April 3rd meeting, but Alan really, really leaned into talking about how essentially I think it might have been the April 3rd meeting.
Yeah, it was last week.
Yeah, it wasn't the CRA on Thursday. I think it was the meeting before that, as someone who watches entirely too much city council.
But welcome in, everybody. We're here with Jason Marlow and Hoyt Prindle. Hoyt, you're an attorney here. How else would you describe yourself?
ago.
Attorney. What else do you work on?
So attorney is my profession. I'm a commercial litigator with a firm called Porter Wright. And otherwise, just active in the community in a variety of different roles. Currently, I serve on the city's
I think
budget
it was
and
the
finance
week
committee.
before that.
And Hoyt, you were
4-3.
were you architecting this offer transportation thing a few years ago? Were you involved in this?
I was not architecting it. I'd love to take that kind of credit, but it would be wrong. That was a brainchild of, I think, Tyler Hudson and Christina Barker and Brian Willis, who's no longer here in the city. And yes, I did some volunteering for it and was involved in it, but that's really their brainchild, and they deserve all the credit for that.
And Jason Marlow is also welcome, Jason.
Thank you. Listen, happy to be here. I mean, like, this is, an opportunity. My big brother over here. I worked at the city council, worked at Hillsborough County Commission. Now I sort of do lobbying consulting for myself. And I've just been deeply involved in city politics really from the moment I landed here in 2017. And it's just been an important facet of, what I'm trying to do with my life is trying to see this community become a little bit better, a little bit less mid.
A little bit
the kids
less
might say.
mid, the subject of the day. Well, listen, thank you guys both for being here today. Last week, David and I were watching this council meeting, and we just happened to pick up the part where Clendenin was talking about the money being sent back to Hillsborough County for transportation.
It might be the FDOT. I think it might be the next item.
He said that I think like half the money went to the attorneys, right? It's like 500 plus $1 million was collected. About half that went to the attorneys. Mm-hmm. And then the other half was sent back. Do you guys know the details on that?
I think the state, the attorneys, and some of the municipalities will all get the money all divvied up. But like ultimately, it's a pittance compared to, here we go.
Go ahead, because I'm going to go off on a rant.
I bet you are. I was going to say that I hereby withdraw my statement and the other municipalities. Thank you, Mr. Bide, for correcting the record on that, and my apologies. Thank you. That's all.
You know, it's just downright theft and bad government of what has just transpired here.
Damn.
Yep.
I mean, it is half. We're talking over what I think close to like $250 million in quote unquote legal fees.
Yeah.
So everybody wants to say, "Damn the lawyers." Damn the lawyers, and damn the politicians in Tallahassee. You know what? I mean, I'm sorry. You think you've got good legislators representing you in Tallahassee? Look at this. This is what they're actually doing. Don't listen to what they tell you they're doing. Look at what they're actually doing. They just stole your money, and especially for the city. I mean, for the people that live in the city of Tampa, you look at this map. Look at the red dots. I mean, God bless them. They represented themselves, because what happened was Tallahassee sent the money to the county, and then the county redistributed. Well, guess what happened? They took all the money.
Yeah.
How many projects are in the county? How many projects are in the city? It's like nothing. You know what? You know what I would have said to the freaking county? Pave your damn roads in the county first, in the city. Take the money and pave what you've neglected year after
100%.
year after year. Most of the complaints I get about the roads in the city, they're not even city roads. They're county roads, because the county doesn't maintain their property that they're legally obligated to pay for in the city of Tampa. And these people
Now,
voted for this in the county.
is he
should be
right?
ashamed
I mean,
of
what's going
themselves.
on
And I
here?
mean, consider this: at $250 million, I mean, I can tell you with certainty, for a mile of sidewalk anywhere in Hillsborough County, somewhere between $900,000 and $1 million for a mile of sidewalk.
And you're talking about $250 million.
Like, that's a lot of miles of sidewalk.
Right.
Like, that's actually money to solve some of the transportation walkability problems we have.
The
you know.
greater question, though, is why wasn't this taken care of? And to Alan Clendenin's point, it's like a lot of these roads that are crappy in Tampa are county-owned and maintained
McDill.
roads. So it's like, why haven't they taken care of it? And especially, why not now? It seems like the money's there, but they're allocating it for all the stuff they're building out east.
I mean, I think so much of that is a facet of who we have on the county
Yeah.
commission right now. You have, I think, a county commission where the number of the members are kind of openly antagonistic to the city of Tampa. Joshua Wastel particularly. I mean, there is a venom that drips from his mouth when he talks about our city and our community. Like, we don't count, even though he's a countywide commissioner and we're his voters too. Like, you cannot ignore the fact that the city of Tampa is the economic engine that makes all of this work.
Right.
All of the folks who are living almost anywhere up into Pasco and Hernando, we're what makes it all work. We're the engine that drives it. So the idea that we should be disrespected to the extent that we are, expand a freeway directly through the urban core, directly, negatively impacting those who live here. Who cares? That's the kind of attitude that so much of our county commission has about the city of Tampa and the people who live here. And it's just, until we change that, that's probably going to be the continued dynamic.
I think you've got a couple of problems at play. One is I think in terms of lack of taking care of county roads within the city. There's a cultural issue here, which I know we'll probably get into later, of just kind of half-assing things and not doing things right the first time, and not making sure things are going to be perpetually taken care of in a good way. And that's not just a county issue; it's been a city issue too. And so you've allowed these roads to get into neglect, where it's going to cost more to fix them than if we'd done it right the first time. And then also, I think what you're seeing is an issue we're having here at the state level, more so in other states, where really it gets down to your politics, right? And the idea of local control is kind of going away. Tallahassee has been on a tear, passing what are called preemption laws, which take the rights away from cities and counties to make decisions and taking them at the state level. And that's basically because the folks who happen to be in charge in Tallahassee right now often don't like the choices that certain cities and counties make. And that kind of continued preemption is a problem. And, you see it with what happened with this lawsuit, where, was it 58% of the voters here?
56, I believe.
Passed All for Transportation that had very dedicated percentages for how those funds were to be allocated, 45% of which was supposed to go to HART. So even if you think that the tax was, unconstitutional, which I would dispute, I think it would make kind of sense to take the percentages that the voters of this county passed and say, okay, well, we're going to take this money, we're going to give it back somewhat in line with what those percentages were. And the state government did not do that at all. For whatever reason, the folks that run this state are very anti-transit and very anti-trains and buses. And so they basically made sure that none of that money went for transit priorities. It all went to road priorities, and that's a problem.
And think about what that means for HART. HART has like a budget of $192 million. Just the other week, Temple Terrace Councilman Gil Schisler at the HART board gave a spectacular presentation about the fiscal cliff that HART is facing. Basically, even after the cuts that HART made in response to COVID in 2020, at the current rate, HART is basically running into like a cliff, like Thelma and Louise at the end of the movie by 2028. And that's with keeping services exactly as they are and no additional sources of revenue. You think about what we could have done with that offer transportation money to make HART a functioning, we could have funded streetcar extensions. We could have maybe helped develop, the infrastructure to support BRT or some form of, train activation. The CSX line that stretches from South Tampa all the way to University and beyond, CSX has one client, to my understanding, that's actively operating on the train right now. The reason why we haven't been able to activate that is because there's not been the funding or dedicated political willpower to make it happen. Like, I think CSX is willing to come to the table. They just don't trust us to be fair negotiators or arbiters or show up without empty hands.
I can't imagine CSX sees a future where there's an increase of freight on that line. I mean, to me, they would identify, okay, well, eventually one day this will be some sort of passenger
like a phosphate
system.
line. It's literally just like moving phosphate. It's basically making our community louder to move phosphate from Florida out to China, which is where our phosphate goes.
So what happened with offer transportation? The citizens of this county taxed ourselves, right, to collect this money for transportation, not just a trolley line, right? Roads were a part of that, correct?
Sidewalks.
Buses, sidewalks, yes, extending the trolley, etc. What happened? I mean, for people that don't know, what exactly happened? Was it semantics? Why was it?
To some extent,
well,
yeah.
I'd hate to spend time going through the whole judicial process, but essentially what you had happen is once the ballot initiative passed, which I think many of the folks that were against it never thought would happen. Once it passed, then all of a sudden they came up with this theory that the transportation tax was unconstitutional because it was mandating how the county commissioners must spend that money in percentage form. Right?
And it was allowing a committee that was basically formed to basically be the allocators of that money. So it wasn't going through the county commission, it was going through the committee. This is at least in 18. And that was what they argued was part of what was unconstitutional. Then when they brought it back in 22 under different, better legal language, then they fought that language, got it paused on the ballot, and that's what ended up causing it to lose by like less than 500 votes.
Was it ever about the idea that we would tax specifically for transit? It sounds like they didn't want that at all, no matter what the language was.
Correct. And again, you could have had these lawsuits beforehand because the ballot language didn't change after it passed. But again, my personal opinion is that you had folks that just never thought it would pass, and then they tried to come up with some legal theories retroactively to say, here's why it's not going to, it shouldn't be allowed. And ultimately a district court judge agreed with them in part, and then the Florida Supreme Court agreed with them, and again, to do that to a charter rule county where, you have a ballot initiative passed that way. I won't get into the legal semantics of it, but totally disagree with that process and the decision. And unfortunately, that has set us back hugely as a community.
I mean, I remember a time when conservatism meant the value of home rule and the value of having municipalities not being dictated to, whether it be by the state or the federal government, being able to make local decisions for themselves. I'd love to know what happened to that Republican Party. Suddenly it's
because it was always focused on the federal government. It was always about the states' rights versus the federal government. And we've had this weird shift in the last 5 years that I've seen, where now it's almost like the people in the cities and the counties, like sitting here in our own community, look at the state as a similar relationship now.
Tallahassee
now you've got that
DC.
rub, right? You've got that rub in between, and I fear that the state has different interests than local government, and local government is at a point where like they keep talking about the same shit. We can't get anything done.
I mean, listen, there's a bill currently in the House and Senate, Senate Bill 1242, House Bill 991, that are about the potentiality of ending community redevelopment agencies, or CRAs, as we know.
Yeah, and they're taking it further, right?
Yeah,
they're taking it further with that and the property tax.
The Senate bill, the conversation is about effectively killing CRAs October 1st of this year, meaning they're like done. They can't expend any new funds October 1st of this year. The House bill would effectively say that they have to end by the date allocated in their charter or by September 1st, 2045, whatever comes first. Like, this is just another way of undermining municipalities' capacity to invest in themselves. This is a resource, whether you're super pro CRAs or against them, it is a tool, a mechanism by which communities can use funds, dedicated funds, to reinvest in combating slum and blight as per statute 173.3. That's the part of CRAs is to combat slum and blight in communities. Well, this is a way to produce dedicated revenue towards that effort. And the state is once again trying to undermine our capacity to make decisions for ourselves.
I don't even understand what the argument against CRAs is.
So I was told that it has to do with, I believe it's Coral Gables or Cape Coral, forgive me, but one of the CRAs in one of these communities effectively has been using the CRAs to fund stuff like community events. And this is, I guess, non-acceptable to some of the members of the powers that be because it doesn't meet their merit of what combating slum or blight is. I mean, I don't know the specifics more than that, but it's just the idea of like, okay, let's throw this isn't throwing the baby out with the bathwater. This is throwing the bathtub out the window.
The whole freaking bathroom.
Like,
well, here's the thing, slum and blight. That's the definition on how you set up a CRA, right? You have to prove slum and blight essentially to set up a CRA. Something like that?
It's part of, I guess, what allows those things to come into existence. I think Drew Park is the most recent CRA in the city of Tampa. I'd have to be specific. Yep. Yeah, this is a real thing, and it's a real problem. And like, I cannot Cape Coral. I just cannot for the life of me understand the idea of a party that for my entire life has been advocating municipalities having the capacity to make decisions for themselves, being the laboratories of democracy.
So House Bill 991 would ban the creation of new CRAs on or after July 1st. So no new ones, but it sounds
and then
like
any existing CRA would have to be terminated by the end of fiscal 2045 or the termination date in the CRA's charter.
Whoa. Also bar CRAs from initiating new projects or issuing debt after October this year.
And so like, think about this, the East Tampa CRA, for example, which I believe has the latest sunset date in the city of Tampa is 2043. So fortunately, city of Tampa complies by that, but it's like, a lot of people fought really, really hard to establish these community redevelopment agencies, and this is completely undermining years and years of hard labor between city staff, state government, county government, and citizens.
So it says Cape Coral Republican Representative Mike Galombardo filed this bill after learning that some CRAs have misappropriated funds. He said their boards, usually comprised of city council members, have used the money to fund pet projects like art festivals and give themselves raises.
Man, so censure
maybe in his community.
Yeah, so
then he goes
members
to Tallahassee and cancels and kills the whole party for everyone. Wow.
Again, it's like, okay, so censure the members you have issue with. Like, have the ethics committee investigate.
Here's my
them.
thing though. They work. Look at Channelside. I mean, that whole entire area was slum and blight, warehouses, and now it's this incredible urban community that people love. So it's like, if they work, you're not looking at that information. You're just what is he looking at? Maybe in his own community, they had an issue with a board member that did something. So he puts a bill in to cancel the whole thing. I mean, it just seems super short-sighted. They do so much good.
It feels like typical conservative logic, like anecdotal experience has happened to me, therefore I must change policy for everyone.
Yeah, and then this whole property tax issue thing too, getting rid of property taxes.
I mean, I almost feel like it's a waste of time for us to even go into this because it's just absurd. It's patently absurd. Property taxes are not going away. All right. The property taxes are what fund cities. It's what funds schools. So let's hypothetically say you get rid of property taxes. Well, that revenue has to come somewhere. Where's it going to come from in this state? Well, I don't think they're going to pass an income tax, so they'd have to raise sales taxes. Now, I'm sure your average person listening to this show probably doesn't want like a 55 or 60% sales tax, which is ultimately like property tax is most of the revenue for cities and counties. So that has to come from somewhere, and it's only going to come from sales tax. So the whole idea is patently absurd. I find it kind of virtue signaling for folks that are, looking 100%. To score points and
why and where does it come from though? Why is there this huge attack on local municipalities? It just seems like every new bit of information at the county and state level ties the cities and all cities' hands, where we'll never get done what we need to get done here.
Well, I think if you just look at Florida, because Florida is a state where you have a large number of unincorporated communities, which is it's a little rare if you went to other, states. even in Texas, right? Like people, these cities have millions of people, have much more jurisdiction here. If you go out to Brandon, people don't realize that's not an incorporated city, right? It's controlled by the county. And so in some ways, right, I think it's just a political cultural issue where some folks feel that all cities do is allow homelessness and blight and waste money and crime, right? And, if that's kind of your general perception of things, well, yeah, you don't want, cities and local governments to have that money. You'd rather have the state, which is more aligned, I think, with your, values controlling that money. So I kind of think that's where it comes from. But a little deep dive, I think most people, even ones that aren't political, would say, yeah, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Like the next time somebody looks you in the eye and talks about how we should end property taxes, I would ask them, why do you want to defund the police? Because like, where do you think their money comes? Like, do you hate the fire department? Like, who do you think funds them? Like, and again, the property taxes, as much as we all might not like them, people who own property are pretty good people to tax. They have the money. That's how they own property. Like,
if it's going to come from somewhere, right? Well, maybe there's other things they can do to limit it. I mean, we have these different, policies that help people out, right? Homestead exemption, stuff like that. Maybe you can increase that sort of stuff to make it more affordable for people. DeSantis's whole argument was, you're basically renting your house from the government. If you have to pay the government every year, it's like, do you really truly own your house? It's kind of a weird argument, but he said something like that.
Well, I mean, some of this, I think, comes from the economic theory that the most efficient way to tax people is sales tax, because you're only getting taxed when you as an individual make a decision to consume something. So if you wish to stay at home and not spend money, you don't have to pay tax. But functionally, right, sales taxes are much more regressive. And so it puts a lot of burden on people who don't make very much money. And that's why, I somewhat appreciate the argument of, okay, like, if you have an expensive house and you've paid it off, yes, you still have to pay for the government services you consume each year, right? That just is what it is.
You like lights, if you like water?
If they'd like to fix a lot of the cost of living issues, one of the biggest things they can start with is fixing the insurance crisis in this state.
Right.
Because, anybody that's owned a home and you obviously develop property, my homeowners has gone up probably 100% in 4 or 5 years. So
it's coming down a little bit. Like on this particular building, it's gone down, call it 15-20%, but it's still up over 100% what it was a few years ago. So it's softening, but that's just a market soften, right? The whole market's softening right now. Costs are going down a little bit, which is good.
And I think the Florida House, not that I ever want to give too much credit to the Florida House, but the discussion about reducing sales tax as opposed to considering property tax, to me, is far more in line with what actually helps working people. Because to Hoyt's point, sales taxes are regressive. And
Exactly.
the person who makes $35,000 a year and has to consume in order to literally survive eats a far greater percentage in their income in sales tax than the person who makes 150.
It just inhibits the people that are less fortunate, the younger, the people that don't own property. Now their taxes are going to go up. All the people that rent and are hard workers and want to save and buy property, now their taxes are going to go up with sales tax. The property tax is not going to affect them. They don't own property.
And
Older people, right? Younger people, people that rent housing, all those people, the taxes are going to go up on.
And
on
I'd say, listen, almost half to 2/3 of the state is hospitality and agriculture. These are blue collar jobs.
Yeah.
These are not sustain a whole family, live in a McMansion industries. So the fact that these folks are the ones who were squeezing tighter and tighter and tighter every year, I don't know how in any way possible that's sustainable.
I just don't think you can do any one of these things at one time. It's one thing if they said, hey, we're going to increase the sales tax, but we're going to provide better public transportation around all these different cities and have a certain fund for it. But it's like, if you're not funding all the public transportation, you're increasing taxes. So now people are forced to continue to drive in their cars and spend all this money, and now they're being taxed. It's like, this is only going to hold down the lower and middle class of the state. It's like, I don't see how this helps the less fortunate and the young and ambitious and the
it doesn't at all. I mean, it essentially helps people with a lot of means, right? Because if you own expensive property, you pay a lot of money in property tax, right? Those are the folks that would receive the bulk of the benefit. Florida, is often touted as a place without no state income tax, right? That's one of the biggest selling points you hear people pitch. Unfortunately, Florida has not done a good job of making sure that it has broad-based income growth and a high average income for jobs. And so they have all these costs that other states don't have, which really put a lot of pressure on your working class folks. I mean, Jason knows I rant against toll roads all the time. And that's not because I think, toll roads should never be enacted ever. But here, toll roads place a heavy burden on working class commuters. I had a op-ed in the old Tribune, I guess it was like 10 years ago, where I did the math of if you drove the Selman 50 weeks a year into work and you made the average income, which I think at that time was roughly $45,000 a year, you paid more in tolls than if you lived in Ohio and paid state income tax to drive one road.
Wow.
So, there's lots of things like that I think the state needs to do a better job of, to say, hey, we have to make sure working class folks have a better shot and have lower costs. Because, we talked about insurance, but think of auto insurance, right? The lack of available transit means folks have to pay for a car. They have to pay for very expensive insurance, have higher gasoline prices than some of our surrounding states. And then for some folks, like, they can't afford to pay tolls. And so you have folks that live up in North Tampa and they drive Dale Mabry instead of drive the Veterans Expressway. So, we could spend a lot of time on that, but I think collectively as a state, we need to do a better job of finding the things that reduce costs for the most broad subset of society.
It's about allocation of resources. Think about the expansion of 275 through Tampa's urban core. As Councilman Clendenin said when he was sitting here, it's gonna, when it's all said and done, assuming it all happens, probably about $500 million. Man, what could the county do with $500 million to invest in things instead of 11 miles of freeway, that goes one way and the other way? Man, what could we do to reduce the costs of working people by making sure they only have to have one automobile at home instead of two? To Hoyt's point, $9,000 to $12,000, to my understanding, is what's estimated it costs to own and maintain a car, both with insurance and gasoline and maintenance a year in this area, about $9,000 to $12,000. That's a lot of money. If you could
That's probably a conservative number too. I bought my lease recently and he was telling me, oh, people are paying 9, 12%, 15% interest. These car payments now, you can't get a car payment for $250, $300.
So $500,000 to double down, $500 million, to double down on hyper aggressive policies that do not help working people, directly negatively impact the folks who live in direct adjacency to that highway. It is astonishing to me to think that we're going to double down on these really, really bad ideas when if we spent half of that money investing in the future, we could do so much more to actually help the people that folks like this proclaim to care about.
But the problem is they're creating the demand when they develop all of this property out in the unincorporated areas of the county. When you're shoving thousands
100%.
and thousands and thousands of homes out in the county, all these people need to get to the city. They need to get to the beaches. They need to get to St. Pete. Goods and services need to get around our region. So what do you do when you shove all those thousands of homes out there? They're not going to build light rail. So what do? They expand the highway. It's all a part of the same circular logic.
Some of that is we've come to culturally accept that all we can do is expand and widen freeways, right? And I think that's a thing we have to push back on, not because building freeways is a bad thing. Freeways have their role in a diverse economic society, but that can't be what we spend most of the money on, because it's the worst in terms of bang for the buck on the results that you actually get about it. What people forget is the reason we are such a freeway and highway dependent country is because the government heavily subsidized roads after World War II. The interstate highway system heavily subsidized by the federal government. If you go back before World War II, where did most people live and what did most people do? Well, most people lived in compact cities and streetcar suburbs. And, most people didn't own an automobile. They took public transit to work because that is what the free market could afford, right? The railroads, right? That was done without government subsidy, right? And so I think it's kind of telling people, hey, you still get your roads, but we have to do it in a way that's smart, and we have to have multiple options, because I think people too often think.
This episode is brought to you by the official remodeler of the TBD Podcast, Kohler House Remodeling Company. Built on the belief that every homeowner deserves a premium experience, Kohler House is redefining high-end home remodeling with their commitment to integrity, craftsmanship, and quality communication. Their work speaks for itself, from condos in the towers of Channelside to 100-year-old homes in South Tampa, creating spaces that are both stunning and functional. What sets Kohler House Remodeling Company apart is their dedication to not only transforming homes into beautiful spaces, but to elevating the standard of residential general contracting. From concept to completion, every detail is handled with care, ensuring a process that's as smooth as the results are impressive. To learn more, check out our partner's website at kohlerhouse.net, KOHLERHAUS.net. This episode is sponsored by Chansey Architecture and Interior Design. Rooted in the heart of Ybor City for over 35 years, Walt Chansey and his team are trailblazers in their field. Beyond their work across the United States and the Bahamas, Chansey has shaped some of the most iconic residential and commercial spaces that serve as gateways to Cigar City, including Casa Marti and Casa Gomez. What sets Chansey Design apart is their ability to preserve the soul and character of historic buildings while seamlessly integrating modern design and functionality. They blend tradition with innovation, creating spaces that honor the past while meeting today's needs. Check out their work at www.chanseydesign.com.
I'll never use transit, so why do I want to pay for it? It won't benefit me. And that is wrong. I mean, I would tell anybody, if you like driving your car, you should be the biggest advocate of public transit there is out there. And you can go to a place like South Tampa and south of Gandy, and you get a perfect example of why that's the case. They're not going to widen Dale Mabry south of Gandy. They're not going to widen McDill south of Gandy. They're not going to widen West Shore south of Gandy, but they're putting a lot more apartment complexes. A lot more people are moving down there, which is bringing a lot more cars. There's nothing to do with those cars. So the only thing you can really do is to get people out of their cars who don't want to drive a car and put them in buses or put them in other kinds of transit options, because that's going to be the thing that opens up the road so that if you want to drive your car, you can do so more freely. Because again, we're not widening any of those roads.
That's a great point. Yeah, it's like even if you don't use public transit, someone will, and that person won't need to be in a car, thereby alleviating traffic.
One less person driving impaired, one less person driving distracted. I mean, it's an everybody benefits issue, because every single person you're putting on public transportation represents someone you're not sitting behind in traffic.
And the ferry's a part of this too. You know, I know that there's some ferry drama. Is it officially dead?
They're going to kill it, I think, effective like as soon as possible. I think the next board meeting, because HMS, I believe, has filed for bankruptcy.
Pull up that article, David.
It's a shame.
Well, I thought that they were going to switch the ships, right? Because this is a company that operates the ferry here is from the Northeast. When it gets warm, they need more services up there, which is where their headquarters is, right? So I think they're sending these ferries up north and sending us slower ones or something like that.
I think the ridership really declined when St. Pete had to move its drop-off from right off Central to a little bit further away, because so much of the appeal was the ability to go effectively from like downtown Tampa right to downtown St. Pete.
Right.
And like, it's just a shame, because in the end, again, anybody who's ever been stuck on long-standing traffic on one of those bridges knows how surreally miserable it is. Every single person on that ferry, and it is a person not on that bridge. The fact that we can't find multimodal means of transportation to get folks to and from a 20-mile stretch, it's embarrassing.
I know. I saw this article. This was in the Business Journal. What are we on here? Fox 13. What date is this? I mean, this is like days old.
I think
this is
like
very, very recent, on the 10th. So only a few days ago. And when I saw this, I thought, Jesus Christ, we can't have anything.
We can't have anything.
It's really disappointing as just a citizen of this county to see something like that get screwed up.
There's a willingness to accept mediocrity, to say no to everything, to not try anything. I mean, to give credit where credit is due. You know, Councilwoman Hertak and so many folks in the community who advocated for the Fare Free program on Route 1, so much of my support for it was just because at this point, can we try something?
Right.
This unwillingness to attempt big, bold, innovative ideas to solve these issues, to engender public transportation ridership. It's insane to me. We're just going to sit here and double down on the same bad ideas in perpetuity forever.
That's what you were saying early on, Hoyt. It's really this cultural thing.
It's a cultural thing, and some of it is a political cultural thing that is somewhat, I find, unique to Florida and our area that is not found in other places. For some reason, we've made this a partisan political issue here, and it's really not a partisan political issue. If you go other places, if you go to Phoenix, who built out light rail. That was done with support of local Democrats and Republicans who control the state. Texas has Dallas, especially the DART has a significant light rail line that was supported by Republicans and Democrats there. And trust me, they build freeways in Texas. They're not everybody's taking transit, but Charlotte. I mean, we could go on and on where all these places. There's not a political divide on the issue. There may be a urban versus rural divide in terms of like rural voters tend to not support it as much
Sure.
because they don't use it. But it isn't really the partisan issue. For some reason here, it's a partisan issue. And I think everybody that is a leader in the community really needs to try to take away the partisanship, because it's really not an R versus D issue. It's about what are we going to do to best make our community better. And I do think we have to start by setting a vision and setting the standard high, and then doing what we can to achieve that. I mean, one of the great things about what Jeff Vinnick has done with Water Street, for example, is that is a project that 15 years ago, like, it would have been like, oh yeah, we can't do that in Tampa.
Right.
Like, we can't do that. That's not the kind of thing we do in Tampa, which is what I hear about so many things, and it drives me crazy. He had the vision, obviously he had the financial means, and he's built that out, and look what it's doing positively for the community. And in so many ways, I think we have to change our attitude to, as Jason pointed out, we got to stop accepting mediocrity. We got to stop accepting half-assed stuff, and let's work together, especially on some of these issues, which I don't think should be partisan. And we could really make progress, I think, if we start doing that.
That whole group, I've had on Jim Schimberg, who was the city attorney, then he was the attorney for the Lightning and Water Street. I had on Vinnick and James Nozar and all these people together. Truthfully, what they did was they just freaking did it. They just did it. They had a high standard and they didn't accept anything else. They wanted an excellent product for this community, and they just did it. And they found a way to get it done. And you're right, it does take a little bit extra means to do that, right? This is an extremely ambitious, expensive product, but you go there today and how fabulous
It's incredible.
is
It was silos and dirt lots, man.
Beautiful, big, mature, shaded sidewalks. I mean, it's the perfect example of urban design. Obviously, every project can't be that nice, right? But there's no reason why standards like that, in terms of sidewalk width, the streetscape, trees, like all of that can be adopted citywide.
Channelside, to me, is in some ways a microcosm of kind of what the city of Tampa should be aspiring to. You know, we talk this big bull game about us being a world-class city or having the ambition or aspirations to be a world-class city. Okay, well, this is what world-class cities do. And so much of, I think, the challenge of the next couple of years with this city is going to be finding ways to cohesively weave all of these parts of Tampa's urban core together, like holistically and seamlessly, in a way where suddenly like Channelside and Ybor and Tampa Heights and that whole stretch is connected in a way where, like, yes, you can just hop on some form of public transit, or there's a multimodal activity that gets you from where you live to where you work to where you play without issue.
I think there's a large part of the population that lives here that believes well, if they build it, then they'll come. People are moving here anyway. It's a fabulous place to live. We have every metric imaginable that drives demand here. People have been coming to Florida for a long time, and we live in a beautiful place. The weather's amazing. It's very easy to do business here. The beach is right there, fantastic airport, the list goes on. So how are we going to develop and how are we going to grow?
I actually want to push back on that a little bit, because
Sure.
I think that is the sense that's lulled us into the kind of complacency that's why we become a place that accepts mediocrity. Oh, we're so awesome. Our weather is so great. Our taxes are so low. Who wouldn't want to live here? Like, no other places that offer what we can offer exist. Let's get real. Like, I mean, in all candor, like, as much as I love the city, and I love it dearly, like, I am exhausted by this idea of, like, we are so awesome, yet, I mean, listen, I worked on the Tampa scorecard with Councilman Carlson. I've seen that data because I crunched the census data. I did that day after day after day. We are not Atlanta or Charlotte or Austin. We might aspire to be there, but we're not
from
there.
a big business perspective, and large corporations and businesses and employers do look at those metrics. I'm just talking about people are looking at a place to move around the country. It's easy to move now. You see different things on social media. You come and visit here. You walk along the Riverwalk. You go to Water Street. You go to the beach. It's a fabulous place, right? People want to live in a fabulous place. This is a fabulous place.
It is.
Well, and I'm going to push back on you a little bit in the sense of, I kind of agree with what you're saying, because there are certain intangibles, right, that aren't entirely within government control, which drive folks to move here. And unfortunately, you cannot totally choke off growth, right? And doing so is usually very bad for the overall economic health of the community. So the problem here is we've just kind of said, oh, like, let's grow without any standards, right? And that, I think, is bad, right? You can grow, but you can have standards to grow that build a long-term and lasting community. I mean, one of the things that I think Stephanie Pointer would talk about that residents care about, paved roads and sidewalks, okay? The sidewalk infrastructure here is atrocious. It's absolutely atrocious. That is driven strictly by a policy decision of city and county governments in the past deciding, well, we're not going to pay for it. We want to be able to develop quickly so folks can make money. So we're not going to invest in this infrastructure. So I mean, like, there's some pictures I sent, and you would see, like, if I dropped a pin on Google Maps on an average neighborhood in Los Angeles, right? What do you see? You see curb streets and you see sidewalks. If I did it in Phoenix, you see curb streets and sidewalks. If I did it in Las Vegas, you see curb streets and sidewalks. If I do it in Tampa, you see no curb, no sidewalks,
Ditches.
I just passed it.
You know,
I passed a kid waiting for a bus in a ditch in my neighborhood on the way here this morning.
Now listen, and this is part and parcel of why let's wave the foam finger. We are what? #1 per capita in bicyclist and pedestrian fatalities. And that's a huge part of it because this is our community. Our world-class aspirational community has this for sidewalk and pedestrian infrastructure.
So I took this, I was out walking, and this is in West Tampa because I live over in Wellswood and I go for a decent walk on Saturday. So I just took this picture of a street, right, in West Tampa. This is not out in the suburbs. This is not outside of the urban service boundary. This is just right in the middle of the city. No curb, no sidewalks, standing puddles. You know, it rains a lot here. It seems pretty important that you want to have proper, drainage and stuff. But, some people look at this and say, oh, well, that's all we can have here. There's no other way to do it. And that is what drives me crazy because if you go elsewhere, other communities don't tolerate this. And so that's a function. So this is Dallas, I think. This is a neighborhood on the south side of Dallas. What do you see? Curbs, sidewalks. And again, some of these they're not the richest neighborhoods because some people say, oh, well, if you go to Hyde Park where all the money is, of course there's sidewalks. In other communities, they choose to just have a standard.
Well, that was put in 100 years ago.
What Hyde Park was, right? But then at some point we made a choice to not do that. But other communities have said, you have no choice. We will have sidewalks and we will have curbs so that we have proper drainage, period. And that's just what it is. At some point we have to say, okay, here in the city of Tampa, we have a standard and that's it. I don't want to hear that you could do it this way, or I don't want to hear that it's been done that way. This is actually Las Vegas, I think. Again, curbs, sidewalks, standard. This is
Los Angeles is a great example because the way that city is developed out. I mean, they even paint the curbs. The curbs are associated, color coordinated to who can park where. Handicap is blue, fire lane is red. I think any parking is no paint, and then there's like yellow for 15 minutes. It's kind of a cool system, but what it does is it provides this foundation grid infrastructure where businesses and people can come and move in. I can tell you this. The scorecard is important for businesses, but when businesses come here to try to relocate employees or grow an additional office, you don't think they pay attention to this stuff?
Oh, of course.
They're looking, where are my employees going to live on? Look at these streets.
Oh, listen,
look at this.
Two things where I think why would a Fortune 500 company want to relocate to Tampa Bay? If you have to sell your employees on 45-minute commutes in a car, in traffic, each way, and by the way, because our public schools here are terrible, having worked in them and knowing, like, you're going to have to send your kid to private school. So how do all of these expenses, do they make up for the low, state income tax? Or I don't think it's improving most people's quality of life just to have a palm tree in their front yard.
Right, but just think about people's children, right, and how important sidewalks are.
Yeah.
I mean, of the basic things a community can do, sidewalks are amongst the top things because it's a safety issue.
Can we ever keep up though? And here's kind of the thing, back to what I said earlier about, if you build it, they will come. I feel like, first of all, we've came a long way. Like this shit was way worse in the 90s and early 2000s,
100%.
right? The administration has definitely been picking up the pace. I'm noticing it in my neighborhood all the way south of Gandy, out here in front of this building. They're shaving down the sidewalks, eliminating trip hazards. You can tell that they're working citywide to try to get this thing handled. We're probably, how far are we behind? Decades behind. It seems like there was a sense in Tampa for the longest time where you couldn't really get strong economic action rolling here. So the consensus in city government was like, oh, developer, oh, employer, come in, do what you need to do. We don't need to make you put in the sidewalks and the infrastructure and all this stuff. Now what I'm saying though is people are going to be moving here whether or not we really fix anything, frankly. These kids from UT, they graduate, they're staying here because it's a cool place to be and it's improved, right? Now there's a little bit higher of a standard that can be set. And to your point, Hoyt, I think you could impose some of those standards and people would go along with it now. Whereas like 30 years ago, it just seemed like, well, the whole city's tore up. Every area is crappy. I'm from Palmacia. Like Palmacia was really a little dangerous when I was a little kid. My mom and I moved out of there. I mean, I grew up with a single mother. There was a murder across the street, sidewalks all busted up. Beta Bay was terrible. I mean, we've came a long way in 30 years and have a long way to go. But I don't think we're the Tampa we were 30 years ago. I think in the last few years, since Brady, since COVID, since Water Street, like we're on the map now for consideration for young, ambitious people. When they're looking to get out of their hometown and move somewhere, we're on that list, whereas we weren't before.
And I agree with that. And I think now is the time where, because we have more successful people here and because we're starting to get more economic activity, this is exactly the time to have the conversation about what the standard is going to be here in the city of Tampa and, what we're going to hold ourselves to. Because what we don't want to do is a lot of this stuff, we can't fix the decisions of the past, right? We're going to have to pay an astronomical amount of money to fix the dearth of sidewalks because of councils, decades ago deciding to allow these just atrocious standards. But right now, that's going to take time to fix. But for the thing going forward, where we're going in the future, we can't have standards of mediocrity anymore. We've really got to set the standard high, and we've got to achieve it.
And maybe we had to take what we could get back then.
Well,
maybe. Does it matter? I mean, no, right? We are where we are. But for a city that needed some juice, maybe you took every opportunity you could get.
Think, listen, people have been grifting here using real estate forever. I mean, look back to what was happening here pre the 2008 recession with like the kind of the real estate speculation that was going on here. It was
Trump
like
Tower.
It was like gold rush style, the kind of stuff that was going on in South County, like tumbleweeds, coming through developments that are half finished with 30% of the people living there and the rest just undeveloped homes. That was a real thing all throughout South and East County. Now, obviously, like we've neglected to, Commissioner Kemp, who was formerly on the county commission, she and several others fought for increasing impact fees that we just let behind for 20 years. Just 2 weeks ago, I believe, on city council, talking about the sidewalk fee in relationship to our discussion. I think some folks, fortunately, in local government are coming to the realization that we have been selling the farm for far too many years, to your point, and we don't have to do that anymore.
Yeah.
And it's time that we work with the private sector to make sure that we're improving the community instead of just giving them everything that they want.
The fear back then, I would imagine, was if we impose these standards, the developers, the businesses, the enterprise will go to Orlando, we'll go to Miami, we'll go elsewhere. And so that's why I would assume that it was kept low, because we wanted to capture that.
I think that's fair, but I think it also, that's what they always say about everything. How is it that, the state of Nevada doesn't have state income tax, right? Like they still managed to put in curbs and sidewalks. Arizona's not a high tax state. Still managed to put in curbs and sidewalks, still managed to have traffic signals that don't hang across the road on wires, right? It's just a policy decision, right? And it's a standard to say, okay, this is the standard and that's it. There's no more discussion about it. So I agree with you, but that same kind of mantra is what we hear from FDOT all the time about, well, we have to have this bad project because if we don't take this bad project, well, the money's going to go elsewhere in the state. Nonsense. The money will go where the political folks tell it to go.
Yes, exactly. And I think that is kind of what was my whole original point, is that we can put those standards in place and the developers want to be here. The businesses want to be here. The people want to be here.
And I think it means having, frankly, a citizenry.
We shouldn't be afraid to have that high standard anymore.
Yeah, and I think it means a citizenry being willing to hold their elected officials accountable to that standard and basically saying, no, you can't just allow everything to get done. I think just recently there was a 3,000-acre, some ridiculous development that was just approved out in East County that's been fought over for 12, 15 years. We got to have folks who are willing to say no to bad ideas on these boards. I mean, obviously,
something like that exacerbates everything we're talking about.
Yeah. I mean, listen, there have been, it's very ironic to me. God, I don't want to make this the pile-on show, but there are certain members of our county commission who have been seeing fit to expand the urban service corridor. And to me, it's man, why are we incentivizing sprawl instead of finding ways to build density where it belongs in the communities where it belongs, instead of making people's commutes out in Fishhawk or Bloomingdale that much worse?
Right.
I mean, it's a joke.
You're setting them up for failure. You really are. You're only increasing the traffic out there and in the city.
We had a county commissioner who basically voted to cut funding from the recently passed CIT to Hillsborough County schools to go exclusively to the building of new schools. Most of the new schools that are going to get built in Hillsborough County are out in South and East County because that's where we're channeling all of the growth. So if you shortchange Hillsborough County on building schools out in South and East County, You're actively hurting your own constituency. Suddenly, the families in your district are wondering why their kid is in a class of 28 to 30 instead of 25. Well, I can tell you why. It's because we cut their funding so they couldn't build new schools.
There's also, I think we've kind of, the government has, if you want to talk about the economic aspects of it, the government has stepped in so many ways to subsidize different things because we've decided as a community that we think, this is important or that is important, that there's a disconnect between the benefits and the real world costs, right? And what I think a lot of people don't appreciate about sprawl is, it's not that we can't have single family neighborhoods. It's not that we can't have diversity in the types of land use that we have. But, there's always been this thought that going and building new developments would pay for itself. And at least initially it does, right? Because you take a grass field and all of a sudden there's homes on there and then you're producing tax revenue. But the issue is it costs so much to maintain the infrastructure out in those communities, especially from sewer and electric, that over time, right, it becomes a loss where you have to subsidize it with other parts of the city. Let's take an example of, downtown or Water Street. I mean, how much tax revenue do you think comes in from one block on Water Street? That pays for a whole lot. Now, take that versus, one 40-home subdivision. And I guarantee it, one block is still producing more tax revenue. It's a heck of a lot cheaper to maintain and facilitate the infrastructure on this one block. And so sometimes I think that's the part of the conversation we have to have with folks is just being honest with them and not trying to say, oh, you can't do this and you shouldn't do this. I mean, that's part of the problem too, right? Is I think there's too much, 0 to 100, right? It's either you're all in on transit or you're all in on roads, and there's no in between. And I think part of the conversation is, look, we can have in between, but we need to be honest with each other about what produces the most tax revenue, what costs the most to maintain, and then make a collective decision based on honest and accurate revenue so that people know what they're getting into. Because a lot of people, I think, again, you just have a disconnected reality on that front because what they're used to is not an accurate reflection of what it costs to do things.
Mm-hmm.
And every city on the list of the world's most livable cities by any metric, by any study, you know what they all have? Robust, reliable public transportation systems. Like, I've been radicalized by my experience in the city of Vienna, which is like 3 years now running the world's most livable city. I mean, this is a city with I think a population of about 4 million, if I'm not mistaken, but it has a deeply reliable, deeply robust transportation system that's multimodal, that gets you anywhere, above the street, under the street, by buses, bicycles, scooters, you name it. And there's a reason why, again, 3 years running, most livable city. What does Tampa have? We have a streetcar that's in some ways kind of currently it's not really a commuter system. It's effectively really more for tourists than we would like it to be for commuters.
It's packed though, man. I was there downtown, and I mean, was 6 cars passed by, and they were all full.
Listen, I love the streetcar. I can't wait to see it extended, but it's like, that's what we need to be investing in and working on. To Councilman Clendenin's point, it's like, that's how, it's weird how sometimes taking Tampa back to the past is where we should be going in the future. But like when you talk about, as you've had on the show, our previous streetcar map, that's where we need to be going. We need to be looking back at the past to examine how we should be changing things in the future.
Well, and I think, your average person often thinks of public transportation as like the New York City subway, right? Or like a dingy bus with people that maybe are of less economic means and don't look like them, right? And so they're like, I don't want any part of that, right? But a lot of public transit is clean and it's safe and it's reliable. And, the streetcar is a great example. People will ride public transit if it's convenient, reliable, and cost effective, right? The streetcar is that. The streetcar, what happened? We made the streetcar free. All of a sudden, you had a bunch more ridership, right? And just think about the economic benefits, because rail is one of the few things that crowds in private investment. Think about when that streetcar was, right before that streetcar was put in, what Channelside looked like. Channelside and all this area is what it is because of the streetcar, because it's dedicated track that can't be moved easily. A bus service can easily be changed, right? Like what happened with HART after COVID. Developers know there is permanency by having this streetcar here, and that allows them comfort when investing. And all of this stuff popped up because we chose to invest in the streetcar. You've had this massive increase in ridership because we've made it free. Look at the Route 1 example, right?
65%.
We're already seeing with the bus, by making it free, you're getting this big
I think
increase
they
of
hit a
ridership.
record month 1. It was free.
Yeah.
Like immediately.
I mean, it's an incredibly progressive idea looking at how can we engender ridership, public transportation ridership in a community where literally the people who are going to directly be positively impacted, working class families.
So many people say it doesn't pay for itself, but to your point, Hoyt, about like the economics of it, looking at it like an investment. I mean, sometimes you don't have to choose, sometimes you do. But if you're going to invest in something like a transit system in an urban core, how much more economic output would there be? How much more taxes would be collected versus a 3,000 unit community out East Hillsboro that will always need roads and infrastructure and payment. The property taxes on those homes will probably never pay for itself, maybe, but certainly not outpace itself. Whereas in downtown in the urban core, one block on Water Street produces probably millions of dollars.
I mean, like, think about like waste management for something like East and South County. How difficult it is for them to get trucks all the way out into the middle of nowhere to service folks like Fort Lonesome. Like, does anybody even like pull up Fort Lonesome on a map for folks who don't even know where that is? Like parts of the county. Like, I mean, I remember in my limited experience when I first started coming to Tampa, what Waimama looked like in 2017 versus what it looks like now. It is unrecognizable with the kind of depth of subdivisions that have come into that area. And this isn't to, like shit on Waimama. It's a beautiful rural community, but it's changed so completely that it's like, these are the areas that are going to start to get developed. Like there's subdivisions popping around this area now. This is BFE. This is the middle of nowhere. This is where banjo music is carried on the wind. Like this is big deliverance territory.
A lot of these landowners and families are very friendly with some of the politicians, and then they get the entitlements, and then they, do the infrastructure and increase the highways. It's this circular thing that's been going on for 30 years. I've watched it happen in front of my eyes, going from Tampa, where my dad's family was, Sarasota, where my mom's family was. I drove up and down that 75 corridor my entire life. I still do it today. And it went from what this map looks like, which is forest and pasture land, to essentially suburbia, the entire 60-mile stretch. My thing is, it's not sustainable.
Absolutely
it's not sustainable at all. The drive now, that used to be 55 an hour, solid. That's a 3-hour round trip now.
Mm-hmm.
And they've built bridges across, and they've expanded the highway. It'll never be enough.
They've just induced demand.
And I don't even think that some sort of transportation network, including rail, would solve it. Like they're shoving so many thousands of homes out in the unincorporated areas. How are they going to move goods and services around this economy without everyone sitting stuck in traffic? It's just the whole thing's, I don't think, sustainable at all.
No, it's not sustainable. It's deeply regressive.
I think you can place thousands and thousands of people in the urban core and have adequate transportation and have a really, really effective economy. A lot of goods and services being created, a lot of tax revenue being generated, and not a whole lot of fuss. People walking around, people riding an extended trolley network. I think it's possible in an urban core. But Hillsborough County has 1.4 million people. How many more people are there going to be until we say, hey, maybe we need to focus a little bit less on the pasture land and more on the city itself and get the economic engine going in the city of Tampa? Sidewalks, gutter systems, curbs, all the above. I hope the pendulum swings back the other way.
Well, and I think what will happen too is more of these good projects come online and people see the benefit of it. Then it produces okay, we need more of this, right?
Right.
If you went to Northern Virginia in Fairfax County and Loudoun County and Prince William, they want the metro. Like they're begging for a metro extension because the DC traffic is so bad. By the way, you want to talk about express toll lanes? Try driving Interstate 66. How many people in this town can afford to pay $46.75 to drive?
That's not how much it is.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, it is.
That's how much the toll is.
That's on dynamic pricing. I could show you the picture, right? Because for dynamic pricing, which is all the express lanes they want around here, for true dynamic pricing to work, you can't have a cap, right? Because the economics of it is you keep bumping the price to deter people from getting into the express lane so you can maintain a certain speed. If you have a cap, inevitably you're going to have backup. So like in the DC area, what they did was they had so much traffic, there was no cap. And so they made Interstate 66 inside the 495 Capitol Beltway completely like tolled express lanes and HOV in like the rush hours and during the day. And what they found is like the traffic was so heavy that at one point the toll to get into DC was $46.75 to drive a stretch of road that would be equivalent of if you're on 275 and you were at the West Shore interchange going to like Waters Avenue, cost you $46.75, right? That is astronomical. And I think people were like, whoa, that's bad policy. So, but people want the metro stops because the metro is clean and it's reliable. If folks know, okay, I got to be to work, and if I show up at a train station at 7:30, a train's going to be here, and it's not that expensive or it's free, they'll absolutely use it. And so one of the things I think I'm excited about is we're starting to see a little bit now with the streetcar and the Route 1 bus. It's like, hey, make this cheap, make it affordable, make it convenient. People will do it, and then you'll get more support for it.
The culture here needs to understand what that is. There's such a negative connotation to public transit here. Yeah. I guess he's my cousin's husband, cousin-in-law, I guess I'd call him. But so he went to school up in Philadelphia. He lived up in the Northeast for a long time. He said up there's no connotation at all. Like, you have business people on the buses, business people on transit. You don't have that here at all. So I do think people need to see it work well. People need to see it be adequate, efficient, clean, nice, usable for that kind of the public to understand what it is and why it's beneficial.
And so much of it is an allocation of resources. I mean, like, I'm going to beat this dead horse that a million other people said. HART is per capita the most underfunded transit agency in the country. We service more people for less money than anybody else. I mean, like, I have a friend who lives in Austria, in a county called Vorarlberg. It's near Liechtenstein in Germany. They have it's a town of, I think, 40,000 people. I think it's a county of about 400,000. They have a more robust transit system than we do. In the middle of the mountains in Austria. Don't tell me that we can't do this here. It is embarrassing. We are a city of 400,000 people and growing by the day. We have an incredible economic engine, both with hospitality and business in our city that drives people here. The cultural and character of our city drives people here. The history drives people here. Don't tell me that we can't do these things. Like, again, this all circles back, unfortunately, to this consistent theme of accepting mediocrity.
Right.
Yeah. So on a smaller example, right, we talk a lot about the big city transit system. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine who goes out to Park City, Utah for the summer. And he was telling me about how convenient and consistent the bus system was in Park City, that they rarely have a need to be in a car, right? They just take the bus downtown and go shopping, and it's very simple and it's very easy. That's something that with time can be done here. The other part of, I think, in the South, right, there is a leftover residual of the civil rights fights over busing, and that has a part to do with why you could go someplace else in the country, it's not a big deal to ride the bus. But here, we're still dealing with that residual, all the fighting and the bus boycotts and everything. And so people, especially white folks in the South, kind of stopped riding the bus. And we're still dealing with that. And so I think over time, as we get a quality bus system back online, that'll slowly go away.
I hope so. And I think it will too. There really is a transition occurring, though. And I think a higher standard needs to be set. Otherwise, this problem is only going to get worse.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it takes, I think, a newer generation of leadership with vision to say that we're going to stop doubling down on bad policies and start trying to do bold and innovative things, whether it be the streetcar extension or the Route 1 Fare Free pilot program. We got to start saying yes to big and bold ideas instead of just finding reasons to say no.
Yeah.
And I think so many of the folks in local politics right now have an unfortunate tendency to lean into saying no when we should be finding reasons to say yes to things that, even if it's just a pilot program, say yes to things that they're going to try to improve our city. If they don't work, we can say no. That's why it's a pilot program.
Right.
Like, it's very frustrating because it's so easy to say no. It takes vision and courage to say yes.
Well, and I it's a 3-word phrase that I would tell residents here. Why not Tampa? Like that should be the mindset. Why not Tampa? You can't tell me the people here aren't as good as the people in LA or Charlotte or Phoenix or Las Vegas or any of these number of places. We have good, productive, well-educated folks here, people that work hard, and they deserve to reap the benefits of a community that has invested in them, that treats them with respect and gives them the world-class services and infrastructure that they need.
It's interesting because people always point to Europe for good urban design. We used to have that here too. I think a lot of people forget that we had the exact same thing, if not better. I mean, American cities at the turn of the century and in the early 1900s were exactly what we're talking about. We're not really talking about anything novel. I mean, we're kind of talking about turning back the clock and creating or recreating what once made this place great. I mean, we had a trolley network that went from Seminole
I would
Heights and
almost
Sulphur Springs
see
down
if you
to
can
Ballast
pull up the
Point.
trolley map, and let's see if we can sort of overlay that a little bit onto what the city looks like today, and you can get a sense of what
I have it framed over there.
What
I mean,
that
it's,
historic network would
my
make
grandfather
available.
used to take that as a boy from his parents' house in Seminole Heights all the way down to Ballast Point and go play. I mean, think about that lifestyle. And then think about what we're talking about now. We're really not talking about new ideas. We're talking about getting back what was taken away from this community and so many other American cities across the country.
Right. And a lot of this, some of it, I think there were bad actors, but a lot of it, there was no bad intention. I mean, America was the wealthiest country in the world after World War II, and we were the only place that hadn't been bombed back into the Stone Age. And so all these people were coming back, and we were the birthplace of the American automobile. And our connection with the American automobile and what it meant for the culture and the jobs and everything is why we've developed in such a way that's much different in the rest of the world. But to your point, America was once the place of good urban compact design that worked for everybody. And yes, while it's going to be hard to kind of transition more to that place, it can absolutely be done. And I think once it's done, as we're seeing around the country with these quality urban infill projects, people want to live in that lifestyle. Because even if you own a car, Jason and I talk about this. Maybe the answer is not to get rid of your car entirely, but maybe it's to go from 2 cars to 1 car. So you're lowering your costs of gas, you're lowering your costs of insurance that you're paying out, and you're more active, right? You're more connected to your community because you're out walking more. You have walk-up shops that are available where you don't have to drive your car to. And most people, when they experience that, they like it.
I believe it's actually the reason why this community and a lot of other communities were so connected to the civic process. I mean, more people voted back then than they do now, and Tampa was like a quarter of the population it is now. It's because everyone was connected to each other, man. Everyone was talking to one another. Different families had different corner stores and businesses.
There's a great writer who I'll shout out, Robert Putnam, who famously wrote a book called Bowling Alone, sort of all about the
I'm gonna write it down.
called basically the desocialization of Americans, how we withdrawn from labor unions, civic organizations, political organizations, voting. He recently wrote a book a couple years ago that's, God, heaven help me now, I'm forgetting the name. It's killing me. But it's basically all about how do we undo this? How do we find ways to try to redraw the bounds of connection between us and our fellow citizens that transcend politics and race and socioeconomic status? How do we find ways to build those bridges? And I think so much of it is by building communities that encourage us to be cohesive. I think to his credit, Councilman Dingfelder, when he was on there, passed a front porch ordinance that made it a lot easier for folks to build front porches on their homes. And I think that's a huge element of what made the city of Tampa so great, is having folks on their front porch, on their rocking chair with a cold beer or a cigar, having conversations with their neighbors, getting to know their neighbors. It's that kind of culture that's a huge part of why people who love Tampa, I think the way that we all do, love Tampa. How many places in the world have populations of 400,000 and have those kind of intimate connections between neighbor to neighbor?
Yeah, and I actually believe that the culture shift is already being craved. I think that younger people and older people want the lifestyle we're talking about. Every Saturday, my wife and I walk to a little coffee shop. It's almost a mile away. We take our baby. A lot of other families do the same thing. I sit there in the corner. It's at the corner of, shout out, South of Gandy Cafe. But it's at the corner of Inner Bay and McDill. And we sit there and you see people come from all quadrants of the intersection. It's not like there's this way we want the city to look and let's build it this way and then all the people will then walk and everything will be great. No. People are already attempting to live this type of lifestyle here in America. The culture is already shifting towards this. Maybe what once made this city great. I don't know. We just sit at that corner store and you see people attempt to already live this type of lifestyle with infrastructure that's not adequate. The crosswalks haven't been painted in a decade. The sidewalks are busted up, and yet people are still attempting to walk.
I remember one of my very first calls to legislative aid at the county. I will remember this forever. There was a woman, I was working for County Commissioner Gwen Myers, big shout out to my work mom. I get this call from a woman in the Palm River, Clare Mel area. Her husband had recently had a stroke. They love to go walking together, around their neighborhood. But since he's had the stroke, he's been permanently disabled. He's in a wheelchair. They had always had problems with the sidewalk around their house because there was an area, I think, where like a tree root was uprooting the sidewalk in a way where it was very difficult for them to walk even before he had the medical issue. So she called in the county and was like, hey, like, can you help us get this sidewalk repaired? Because it's a real struggle for me to push my husband in his wheelchair around the sidewalk so that we can go on our nice walks together. It's an important part, of our relationship and us being happy. So I call county staff, and county staff comes back and like, Jason, I need you to understand something. We have $1 billion with a B sidewalk deficit. So he's like, here's what I can do. He's like, I can put a cone out there or I can tape the sidewalk. I was like, so wait, so what you can offer this woman who's had a cracked sidewalk for years, who now struggles to push her husband in a wheelchair, is an obstruction that further obstructs the sidewalk that she's trying to walk her wheelchair, push her wheelchair-bound husband on. I was like, this is not the solution to our problems if this is what we're at. And I think so much of our problem is we've spent years either not collecting impact fees from developers who robbed us blind and not allocating the monies to where they needed to go, which is the kind of infrastructure that builds quality communities. We've let 20, 30 years go, both city and county, of not investing, to Hoyt's point, in a community that people can really look around and be super proud of the infrastructure and investment that they see and where they live.
Mm. And is it too late? Maybe it's never too late, but to your point, how far behind are we? It's not like this is a 5-year problem.
That would have been November or December of 2020.
Yeah.
$1 billion sidewalk deficit. Now remember, $900,000 to $1 million for a mile of sidewalk.
Right.
So like that math hurts.
Which also I think gets into a broader discussion that's not related just to Tampa. There was an interesting opinion piece in the New York Times several weeks back, which talked about the ability in this country to get infrastructure built and how it's too slow, it takes too long, and it's too expensive, right? It should not cost $1 million to build a mile of sidewalk. We're talking about concrete and pouring it and the labor, something that was done 100 years ago. It hasn't changed all that much, except now there's ADA compatibility. But otherwise, sidewalks are mostly still the same. So, and that's not a Tampa problem, but that's more of a national problem I think we have to solve.
And in a right-to-work state, you can't complain that that's the labor cost being driven up by some union driving some kind of hard bargain. This isn't like one of the situations where the labor is the bleeding edge of that cost.
I think it's the same reason why affordable housing is not affordable to build anymore, because you have the fire code and the building code and this code and that code, and if you want to build a sidewalk, it's got to be 27.5 inches from this thing, and then you got to get the engineer and stuff. It's like we've red taped ourselves into oblivion. And so anything is insanely costly to get done.
No, I think there's truth to that. I mean, listen, Marx writes that bureaucracy is a circle that no one ever leaves. And I think there's some truth to that. And I think, listen, as a Democrat, I mean, I'll say, listen, there's certainly instances where progressive municipal policies have been overly restrictive and have overly bound people in red tape. And we should be looking at ways where we can make things like permitting more efficient in ways that are responsible to the community and the neighborhood. We're also trying to make sure that we're getting shit done.
The sentiment of government efficiency, government waste, and cutting spending and all that, I think is great. But my fear is that you can't have all of these codes and rules and red tape and bureaucracy along with, we're going to cut this funding and that funding, and we're going to cut, the tree grant we got and this and this and this. And it's like, how is Tampa ever going to catch up to this entire conversation about our infrastructure? If the federal government can't help us out and the county maybe is unwilling to, the city's never going to be able to build these sidewalks and these curbs, let alone extend the streetcar, let alone some sort of a rail system from the airport. I mean, it's like, this all costs an ungodly amount of money, let alone stormwater.
I think it's a reflection of leadership. I mean, listen, man, we have to have people at the county level who care holistically about Hillsborough County as a whole, not just selective parts of it that voted for them.
Right.
We need people who actively care about the capacity for, this place to be, what it aspires to be, a world-class community that everyone wants to live in. As we keep talking about how wonderful a place it is, but as it's gotten more and more and more expensive to live here, I think you're going to see more and more folks, younger people, looking at Tampa and thinking maybe it's too expensive to live here.
I've already seen
and
it
the
happen.
wages are not high enough.
Yeah.
Why would I want to live here when I feel like maybe I don't get a palm tree, but I could go to somewhere in North Carolina or Boulder or somewhere else out in the country.
Well, Charleston, Savannah, there's places in the South that are great little urban markets. A lot of those kids that graduate UT are considering that now. They're like, dude, if I can live here and get a job, but where am I going to live? It's so expensive. What a shame to lose those college educated, ambitious people to Charleston, Savannah, or anywhere else.
And while it's not UT because it's a private school, but if you went to a public school in the university, you got subsidized with Bright Futures scholarships. That's our taxpayer dollars. So you took our taxpayer dollars and then left and then created tax base somewhere else.
Exactly.
Which is like, I mean, I know so many folks from our cohorts at Florida State. I mean, so many folks, extremely bright and capable. The second they had an opportunity to get out of here, they fled.
Well, and it would be a shame, because historically the problem was we didn't have good jobs. It wasn't cool to be here. And so you used to hear Bob Buckhorn all the time talk about, like in 2011, tired of our kids moving to Charlotte and Austin and Dallas, right? And so, the city's come a long way, I think, in being an attractive place to come now. Well, it'd be a shame if we lost that, because now it's like, well, it's too expensive to live here and we don't make a lot of money, so we're going to move to Charleston. I mean, Charleston's a great city, but I don't want us to become known as the place that can't keep people, that loses people to like Charleston and Savannah. Like that's just unacceptable. Can't happen.
Charleston's done a great job at everything we've talked about. I mean, I was there recently. The infrastructure, the walkability, the little corner stores they have. I mean, in kind of a sense, they've turned back to the clock on that city and really done a good job of urban design.
And so can
and
we.
Young people that visit, 100% so could we. But young people that visit that market, they're like, okay, this government, this economy works for me. I'm going to move here. Yeah, it's a shame that young people would come here and not think that way. Because to me, this is the greatest city in the country. We have as much opportunity as any other place.
I mean, the idea of us as a state subsidizing a student who goes to USF, graduates, with a scholarship provided by Bright Futures, and then immediately decides to take that taxpayer subsidized public education and leave to create tax base somewhere else. That should keep people in leadership awake at night.
Right.
Like, why are we losing the best and brightest that we're raising here in our community so that they can make some other community better? Mm-hmm. We should be incentivizing these folks to want to stay here, raise a family here, contribute to our community in a way that makes us better for the future. Because, we're not going anywhere if we're stuck in these regressive patterns of just being ruled by people who love to say no.
My wife's trying to drag me across the bridge. She's like, St. Pete's downtown's better. It's more walkable. It's nicer. It's this. There's more coffee shops and restaurants. I'm like, babe, we can't leave Tampa. I've got work to do here. I've got some business to do here.
I think St. Pete's downtown
but guess what?
is better.
She's right, in a
but
way.
St. Pete as a city is not. I mean, that's my own personal opinion.
Sure.
I'm not trying to slate our little sister across the bay. But I do really feel like while St. Pete's Central Avenue in their downtown is far more cohesive and a better consumer citizen experience, I think holistically the city of Tampa is far superior in what we offer, both the history and the culture and the vibes and the experience.
I'm right there with you.
I will always take Tampa over St. Pete with the exception of, that Central Avenue corridor. Man, they got lightning in a bottle down there. That I really wish we could find a way to recreate the combination of public space, green space, art, restaurants, retail. I mean, it is what time of day can you go there and Central Avenue ain't hopping? Mm-hmm. That's to its credit. They have really managed to manifest something there really special. And I'll say, man, we haven't really even talked about it, but I'm hopeful that when Gasworks comes online, you will see something like that in Ybor. And as that comes online, it'll sort of do what I was saying earlier, which is sort of help cohesively weave these disparate parts of our urban core more together in a way where now it's kind of like a seamless experience to go from Tampa Heights all the way down to Water Street and back.
That's the next thing this city really needs to look at.
That's
and
the
focus
challenge
on,
of
is the
27.
connectivity between these larger scale developments.
Yeah.
It means shit if they're not connected to each other.
100%.
Yeah.
Well, and we have some regional projects that we need to get done, certainly both for roads and transit. But I think what Route 1 and the streetcar are also showing is we need to start, almost to your point, in the city and kind of organically grow out. Because if you do that, the transit connections make more sense for people. I mean, people are not in Wesley Chapel are not going to drive to a station to get on BRT and ride into downtown. I mean, at least with not any frequency or significant numbers. Those are the kind of projects that make people go, this is why I don't want to spend money on transit, right?
Right.
But the kind of projects that we're talking about make people go, okay, that's worth it. And even folks maybe that don't benefit it, they can say, okay, well, it's working, and so it's helping the community, and so then maybe I can get on board with it. And I think our local leaders should remember. There's Ed Rendell, who's been governor of Pennsylvania, had a very short quote that said, "Good policy is good politics." Right? Have good policy that works, and it's good politics because people will like it. What people don't like is stuff that doesn't work. And depending on the issue, of course, there's a wide variety of reasons for that. But these kind of things aren't real hard because, to your point, Tampa was once this way.
Yeah.
We know it can work here. It has worked here. It just is a matter of getting the community will and the way to get it done to almost field of dreams, if you will. If you build it, they will come.
And
in this case, come back.
And it's having the right elected leadership. It's having a county and city that work cohesively together, that work hand in hand, and seeing both communities, prosper. I mean, we are Tampa. We are part of Hillsborough County. We should be seen by Hillsborough County as an intrinsic and important part of this county and region. And instead, frankly, they shit on us constantly. We desperately need to have a relationship there that is cohesive and collaborative, because that's how we're actually going to get stuff done. When it comes to the county-owned roads of the city, like let's say like McDill, that have like potholes that could swallow a smart car whole, like we got to find ways to solve these issues. I mean, that means investing in it. And again, so much of what we're talking about is like, we are exhausted of hearing people say what we cannot do. Oh, it's too expensive. Oh, we can't do that. Like, shut the hell up and go up and do your job and find ways to get things done, tangible things done for the people. What the hell else are you up there for?
So I'll give a shout out to Alan Clendenin in this case, who is, full disclosure, is a good
friend of ours.
But, I think you're seeing that, right? Alan's been laser focused in trying to get the streetcar extension done.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no excuses, just like, let's get it done. And I think, there are others who have that mindset on particular issues, but we need more of that, to the Vinnick mold that you talked about. Like, here's what we want to do. Let's just get it done, and we do what it takes to get it done.
Well, you brought up an interesting point about focusing on the urban core. I advocate for that all the time. I'm not a suburbanite, but if I was, I'd rather stay in my car from Wesley Chapel to the urban core, park in the urban core, and be done with the parking, be done with the car. Now I'm on the streetcar. I go to a Lightning game. I take it up to Ybor. I get a cocktail. I go to dinner, do my business, have fun, do whatever I need to do in the urban core, then get in my car and go back up north and leave. That's what I think people in the suburbs and the unincorporated areas need to understand is investing in transit within the urban core is fantastic when you come and visit. I don't think, look, to be honest, some sort of a BRT line from Wesley Chapel as an example, or like a light rail station up there where you go park, get on a rail line and come down here. Would I love to see that? 100%. I would much rather focus on fixing the urban core first, making Tampa a real city again. Then you can get in a car, come and park and enjoy it for the whole weekend if you wanted to, and then get in your car and go back home. To me, it's a much better investment to focus on the urban core. I mean, just looking at this picture, right? This map is from 1914. I've shown it a million times on this podcast, but I never get sick of it.
No, me neither.
Because look at the density of rail we used to have. Look at what was lost. It's actually perfect, David. Good job, buddy. You pulled it up at the modern
juxtaposition is really
I mean,
perfect.
it's a shocking example of what we used to have. This is again in 1914, and what we have today. Look at the massing of urban area that was destroyed by these highways.
And I think about the folks who live in, let's say, Sulphur Springs or East Tampa, which to this day are two of the most impoverished communities in our city. I mean, if you found a way to make it so the folks that lived there only needed one car because they had a public transportation option that was reliable and consistent, you're changing the lives of the families that live there. I mean, this is not light work. This is not like something casual. You're actively changing the lives of working class people in these communities by providing them opportunities to save massively on their household costs. Like, this is a no-brainer.
Right.
Well, too, the other thing that's interesting about this is, people would say, okay, well, this worked in 1914, but it doesn't really work for sprawling, more spread out communities. And that too isn't true. In fact, Los Angeles, before they were the freeway capital of America, was actually probably the streetcar capital of America, the Pacific Electric Red Line. There may be a map of that somewhere. And if you go back and you look at the pre-freeway era in Los Angeles, they had an extensive red car line that took you all the way from Santa Monica out to San Bernardino, which is in a different county, right? And you're talking, 50, 60 miles? I mean, this really integrated network that the utilities paid for, in part to offshoot some of the electricity that they needed to get rid of. And it was really robust and it was world-class, right? And people used it because it was, again, convenient, reliable, and cost-effective, right? Those are the three big things. And then, we will, anybody who's seen Who Framed Roger Rabbit can watch what happened to the streetcar. Basically, GM and Firestone set up all these shell corporations,
Right.
buy them up, shut them down. But the idea that it can't work in sprawling communities too just isn't true, right? But one of the things I think we have to think about is
Holy shit. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So
super extensive.
Yeah, and this probably doesn't even cover all of it, but you can.
No, this is just the downtown area.
Wait, yeah. So you got downtown, and you've got Pasadena, which is where the Rose Bowl is, and Glendale, which is another suburb, and then on the far left you can see Beverly Hills, and then you've got Inglewood, which is where the Rams Stadium and the Clippers play now, right? And this was a supremely integrated streetcar network, right? And in a pretty sprawling area, and it worked fine, right? Obviously, customer preference changed after World War II. Cars were more cheap. People have more money. They built freeways, and things changed. But the idea that you can't have transit in a sprawling community just isn't true. It's about how you build it, right? And to your point about the BRT thing, the reason people drive is it's the quickest option for them, right? I mean, it's that simple. Like
100%.
I drive from my house to downtown because that is the quickest way for me to get there. After COVID, they got rid of one of the bus lines that used to go by my house that used to go downtown. So I can actually walk downtown quicker than I think I can take a bus downtown, because I have to take a bus that goes northeast of me to then get off to then get on the Route 1 bus to go south, right? And that's why I don't take the bus. It's not convenient, right? We've got to be talking about the convenience thing. And yes, it's going to cost money, right? Yeah. Whatever we do is going to cost money, but let's think about where are we getting the biggest bang for our buck for that money. And I will, again, we did this when I was out campaigning. I would tell people, if you want to drive, you should be pro-transit, because getting those people, I think we've talked about that picture, right? Where it's got how many people in cars, individual cars, take up space on the road, how many people on bicycles, or how many people in one bus. If you're sitting in an intersection, right? Let's say you're sitting at Dale Mabry and Kennedy, and you're stuck in all this traffic, right? And you've got 40 cars around you. Well, let's say you take all people in all of those 40 cars and you put them on one bus next to you. How wide open does the road get? How much easier does your time get?
Right.
So that's really what I want to harp on with people, is just to say, look, you may not use it, right? But it does benefit you. It will benefit your commute. It will make driving easier for you if we can get other people who want to the ability to take a bus.
Tampa doesn't need to be the Trader Joe's parking lot.
God, that's a whole nother.
I'm just saying, it doesn't have to be like this.
We could spend an hour on that parking lot, but
you could spend an hour in that parking lot. That's accurate. That's an accurate description of how much time you could spend in that parking lot.
No, this is a great photo because it shows you all of these people in their individual single cars. These are the people standing out if they were walking, and these are how many all these people would fit into these two buses. Look how much less space.
If you want to drive a car, you should be pro-transit. So many people in America harp on the freedom thing. I don't want to ride the bus. I don't want to. I'll never use it.
Oh man, I know who we're talking about.
Well,
we're talking about a lot of people.
I know, I know specifically.
But I realize not everybody shares that philosophy. But I think that is the true philosophy. I'm not one of these people. I like transit, but I love driving.
Yeah,
I love driving on freeways. I love going to Texas and driving on the freeways.
He likes driving too much. I've had this experience.
I enjoy driving, but I also enjoy having a walkable community too. We don't have to, and this goes back into the discussion about preemption earlier. It's kind of the same thing. We don't have to mandate that everybody do the same thing, right? You can be pro-transit without being like, we will never spend another dollar on roads, right? That's the mindset we have to shift away from. We have to get to the mindset of how do we benefit the most people in our community with the most diverse desires, right? So we can have transit and we can have roads, and people can do both. These are not conflicting things at all.
And I think it's necessary. I don't think there's an option where we don't do transit anymore. Again, I think the amount of people that are going to be moving here is going to be incredible, historic. It's going to happen the rest of our lives. And if we don't solve it, it's only going to get worse for everyone.
I mean, listen, I'm going to pick this fight because it's a bone I like to just continue to gnaw on. When Wasta was sitting, I believe, in this chair, he talked about advocating for a spoken wheel system. Putting more cars on the road. You're telling me the solution to transportation in this community is how can we put more cars on the road? Like, how is this helpful? This is like, I'm going to quit cocaine by supergluing my nose
wheel
shut.
system. Explain that. What did he mean by that? I don't remember. I remember he said it, but what was he saying?
Can I take this one? Because
go for it. I'm looking forward to this.
Spoken wheel, even if you wanted to drive, is the least effective way of creating a road map for automobiles to drive. You see spoken wheel systems in places like Atlanta how well does the traffic move in Atlanta?
Right.
How efficiently does it move in Atlanta? You know what? The most efficient road design to move cars is a grid system, which we actually have pretty well here in Tampa. And so, when you get off some of the major arterials, you can still get around because there's a street grid. Like if you pulled up a map, like if you just went to Google Maps and you pulled up Atlanta, like let's just pull up a suburban view of Atlanta if you can. And granted, without hearing what Mr. Wostel said, like if you were just talking about the spoken hub, right? This is because it's that old design of how people used to get around.
Put every car on main roadways and take them all off the other streets,
and shoot them into like synergistic places, right? This is what Atlanta is. You have I-75 goes northwest and south. I-85 goes northeast and southwest. I-20 goes east and west.
You know what they're doing now? Spending hundreds of millions of dollars undoing that and realigning the street grid. Well, so it's like, here's the thing about Tampa too, which I think people should understand. We don't have to be the pioneer in any of this. We can look at other cities around the country and go, that's not what we want to become. Ooh, that's a good example.
But we should be doing the kind of stuff here that other cities want to come to us and look at the stuff that we're building, the stuff
100%.
that we're designing. Like you're 100% right. We don't have to be the leaders. We can be followers on some of this, but we should be innovating in ways where people want to look at what Tampa is doing. We should be a model that other folks want to look at.
The other thing that's interesting about Atlanta, though, is not only have they been trying to get more mileage for MARTA, but they've also invested extensely in these greenways, ways for people that are walking or biking to be able, to connect through these trails. So I think Atlanta, and this goes back to another issue. I point to LA a lot, right? Because LA has been through almost everything that Tampa could go through, right? And so LA started building freeways in the 40s, right? You've seen the genesis of what happens, right? When you just build. Eventually, LA said, can't build any more freeways. We've tried. Traffic's still horrible. We've got to invest in transit. Atlanta goes through that. All of these bigger cities that have worse transit, Washington, D.C., eventually go through that process. And so some of what I try to communicate to people is, like, we know where this is going. So let's not run out the entire LA timeline of like, we're going to build all these roads and freeways. And then when traffic is so horrible, right, that it reaches that tipping point where now we have to build transit. Let's try to cut that off, and let's not make the traffic here so bad that like you can't even go someplace at 2:00 on a Saturday afternoon. That's the other thing people forget about. In Tampa, you got bad rush hour traffic, but you have bad rush hour traffic here. When traffic really starts to get bad in a community is outside of rush hour. You can be stuck in Los Angeles on the 10 freeway at 9 p.m. at night.
Yeah, but you can be
right?
stuck out in the East County, Sarasota County, Lakewood Ranch, the suburban areas where they're shoving in the homes and the highways. I mean, truthfully, what I fear is that the county, East County, Manatee, and down south of Sarasota will just become what LA is, where it's just this massive suburbia with all these highways in between. Guess what? It doesn't work. It's been played out over the last 50 years.
And so that's part of it too, like is the leaders in the community, as we communicate with the voters, is, let's not make sure it gets that bad here, because that is where it's going. If you continue to pour people in here and you continue to have more roads, that is the result. It is inevitable, and it doesn't work for the community. So we've got to transition out of that now, to not only to make the community better, but to save money. Right.
Steel manning the argument pro all of these homes out in the county, more freeways. How I personally can't understand how you could look at Atlanta and all these other LA and see how it plays out for us in a positive way, right? In terms of the suburbs and all these highways, right? We know that that's going to put roads on top of roads, and traffic is never going to be better.
It's a nightmare, and it kind of.
How do you steel man that? Like what are they saying that is logical? I mean, is it hurricane evacuation? Like, what argument are they making that would make sense?
I mean, I'll say for the freeway expansion, that's been the argument. For the freeway expansion through Tampa's urban core, the argument is highway expansion, which I mean is so supremely laughable, because why do you need a southbound lane then? Because often when a hurricane hits, I think I need to get closer to water where it is safe.
So a lot of things in transportation can be counterintuitive, right? And I think your average voter out in the suburbs, right, sits there and thinks, okay, my neighborhood's off a 2-lane road. Mm-hmm. And if we make this a 4-lane road, traffic will get better. That's how the average voter thinks, right? And this is not to say you never expand roads, you never build more roads, but generally what the problem is, especially with main arterials, is you have this concept called induced demand, which we've kind of talked about, which it's counterintuitive, which is to say the wider you make a freeway, for example, the more traffic and ultimately the worst travel times that you will get. This concept is played out in a variety of areas around the country. LA's 405 freeway, San Diego freeway through Sepulveda Pass there on the west side, where UCLA is, over into the valley. They spent $1 billion widening the freeway, and travel times now are worse than when they were before. Maybe the best example I've seen is the Katy Freeway, Houston, Texas, Interstate 10, which goes west from downtown.
I still have nightmares.
Out to the suburbs.
I still have nightmares.
There are, I think at its maximum point with what they call feeder roads, which is most of the Texas freeways have service roads alongside. And they have express lanes, which everybody, all the FDOT wants. 26 lanes across. All right.
Yeah, pull up the Katy Freeway so we can give other people my nightmares.
I mean, it's an abomination to look at from an aerial view. And I think TxDOT.
K-A-T-Y, not K-D.
D-Y, I
yeah,
believe.
K-A-T-Y, yeah.
Or D-Y?
No, K, that's right,
T-Y,
Katy Freeway, yeah. It is, I think TxDOT spent $2.8 billion. All right, yeah, so look at this. You have the feeder roads on the side, which actually work pretty efficiently, and then you have the massive freeway, and then in the middle you have the tolled express lanes, all right? So at some stretches, this is 26 lanes wide.
God.
They spent almost $3 billion widening this freeway about 15 years ago. And, of course, what will happen initially, right, is you get this initial boost, and then induced demand kicks in, and it gets worse. So travel times on a stretch of this, after they spent $3 billion, worsened by 30 minutes. Worsened by 30 minutes at rush hour. Same thing happened in LA, although not as bad with the 405 widening through Sepulveda Pass. Added more lanes, added an HOV lane, and travel times got worse. And it's because induced demand. Because what happens is people see a wider road, and it induces them to make more car trips. You've had Josh Frank on the show. He does a great job of explaining this concept.
The good Josh,
right? So. Again, it's not to say that you can't ever, like new roads, right? I look at it a little bit differently, right? If you're making new connections, like
sure.
You had a connection from 75 north over to the Suncoast and Pasco, right? Different thing. But jamming more lanes through the urban core almost universally will not work. And you can already see this with the downtown interchange, right? It is a flawed design. So all of this stuff about, we're going to widen the interchange, we're going to, safety improvements, even though it has no breakdown lanes and parts, right? Not real good safety. Mm-hmm. But what does everybody see, right? Going southbound on 275, you'll have that line of cars that always stacks up at I-4, right? And people were concerned because, people would come down the side, they'd cut over, right? Well,
you have to.
Right, you have to.
Yeah.
Now it's wider. All it's doing is shifting that a couple lanes left, right? And the problem is, they can widen it and maybe it'll work fine for a year, but it's going to end up in the same mess because the design itself is flawed. It's like the 210 interchange in Pasadena, right? It's curved, right? There's no way to keep traffic volumes at a high speed, right? So you have to slow down, you have to curb, you have to merge. So you can do this widening and do the interchange, but it's still going to lead to a functionally obsolescent design, probably within 2 years of when they open it when it's complete.
And if it happened in LA and it's happened in Houston, why pretend the story will be different here?
What do they say the definition of insanity is?
Exactly.
I mean, like, this is it.
Right.
This is literally it. Doubling down on regressive policies and politics that we know haven't worked literally everywhere else and saying, yes, but here they will. One more lane, bro. Trust me. Just one more lane, bro. It'll solve everything. I promise. So get out of here.
Yeah.
So, flip side of that, right, is and Josh has been, his Boulevard project, right? And, people have lost their minds about, like, the Boulevard project. Like, it's going to destroy all the connectivity. Without even studying, without even spending any time with it, they're just like, we can't tear out a freeway because travel times will automatically get worse. That isn't true. In fact, I'd point to Atlanta, actually, when that fuel tanker burned down, like, Interstate 85 and, like, shut the freeway down for months. They functionally didn't have worse travel times, and it's because people just adjusted to the
which
new
is a crazy
reality.
fact.
And this is Atlanta, right?
Right.
I mean, so, I try not to talk in absolutes, but for induced demand, it's a scientific concept. Like, it's coming, right? Now you can make other decisions and say, well, we need to widen for this or that, but like, it's not going to improve the traffic outcomes.
Yeah. Yeah, they're talking about extending the Selman. They're going to extend the Selman essentially from where it ends now down 301, I believe, kind of into the Riverview area, right? And then they're also going to widen it through South Tampa. I have had Greg Slater on the show. I love that dude. He's super forward thinking when it comes to managing this expressway system, including how to tackle some of the intricacies through the urban core. What do you do underneath bike trails? He really is a forward thinking guy. But here's my thing. Before it was called the Selman, it was called the Crosstown. It was made for people to go crosstown. If you extend it down South County and widen the lanes through South Tampa, aren't you just creating like another I-4 directly through the city and through the urban core?
And I-4, I'll add, I believe per mile, the nation's deadliest highway. I mean, like, this is not
I-4.
If we're trying to like look at examples, this is the exact opposite of what we should be looking at.
I get the sentiment. I understand, you need more cars to go down this lane of travel, and to get from St. Petersburg to Riverview is a hell of a lot easier going the Gandy corridor, especially with the above Gandy connection and all that. But at what point do we stop and say, hey, look, this expressway is designed just to be used by people? I mean, it was originally for people in the city to go cross town. Mm-hmm. Now it's like a full-blown interstate highway is what it's turned into, a toll road.
Well, yeah, we've, I think, justified some of the expansion for regionalism purposes, and people love to use the hurricane evacuation stuff. And I agree with you. Greg does a great job.
We're lucky to have a guy like that, truthfully in charge of something like that.
But I think the challenge, right, with any agency like that, especially with tolls, is they will find new projects to do because they have to keep spending money and justifying it. Because think about it, if they paid off all the bonds and they had no more outstanding, payments in that regard, where is that money going to go, right? Is it going to go to transit? It could.
I mean, I would argue fix the landscaping, repaint some stuff, clean it. They expand and do all this stuff on the expressway, but then it's like all the shrubbery's overgrown. That's what I would say.
I guess my point being is that, like, I think that setups like that, it just by nature, they're going to always be looking for more projects to do so that there's a continued reason for the existence, so that there's a continued reason for spending, the toll money, right? I look at the Dallas-Fort Worth Turnpike, which was Interstate 30 from downtown Dallas to downtown Fort Worth. That was eliminated when the bonds were paid off. They took the tolls off. Florida doesn't ever consider doing that, right? So you have to have a use for that money. I think what I'd like to do is I think they're doing this a little bit in Miami. I'm not totally sure, but it would be to take some of that money from THEA, right, and invest it in transit, right? If you're really just killing it on all these tolls, like, maintain your facilities and stuff like that. But
pull up the Business Journal article, David. They had a record year. I think they've had an incredible amount of revenue, like $130 million. I think to your point, they're making a ton of money and they've got to spend it, right? And, when you have this insane amount of growth out in the county, all these homes we've talked about, yeah, these people need to get over to St. Pete. These people need to get around the entire region. Well, if you can't expand the highway, I mean, they just did that. You can expand the Selman. Like, I understand, and then if you don't do it, well, then all that capacity gets added to the interstate, making the traffic worse there. I understand why they're doing it, but this all circles back to what we're talking about, which is, when is enough enough? Like, at what point do we invest in other forms of transportation to alleviate traffic instead of just shoving more homes in and building more highways, and then we're LA, then we're Atlanta,
we'll
expand and then we're
the
Orlando.
Freeway and do spoke and wheel.
No one wants to live like that, man.
Right, and again, I think sometimes it's a matter of communication to say, hey, $1 billion get you one freeway interchange if you're lucky, right? I mean, that's probably what West Shore interchange is going to cost. $1 billion on like light rail and heavy rail and buses. That builds out
a hell of a long way.
You can bring CSX to the table. I mean, like, I think I saw somewhere in the meeting for HART last week with Gil Schisler, I think they said that the buses, I think initially they were somewhere in the lines of about 100,000 something to purchase. Now they're like exponentially more expensive. HART's costs are doing nothing but go up. We got to find ways to get them some kind of dedicated revenue source that's going to allow them to put real money against our transportation issues.
The other problem is, HART is so underfunded, and so it's operated and been operated so poorly that it just gets worse, right? And we're just throwing good money after bad because we're not really taking an honest view to say, what do we need from a resource perspective to really make this system work? I mean, it's almost just like a checkbox thing to say, well, we've got, we have a bus service here, right? We're not one of those communities without a bus service. We have one, but it just gets worse and worse and worse. And so people don't want to ride it, and we're just wasting tax revenue. Like, I mean, if we're going to spend the money, let's try to make it right.
Without offered transportation, though, how do you do
that? So there's it's interesting you bring that up. So there's really 4 ways, I think, in Florida that you can get, money for transit. You can get general revenues from the county and the city. You can get, you could raise the millage, right? Because under statute, I think HART could charge up to 3 mils, and it's currently $0.5 mil. You could do the sales tax again, or you could get state appropriations. The last one is one that I really think we don't talk enough about: Sunrail state appropriations. Right? Why is Orlando good enough to get state money to build a rail system, and we're not here? I mean, we've had the Speaker of the House here. Why can't the state invest in this community the way that it has elsewhere? And I think ultimately, because the state has so much more resources, that's going to be part of the conversation, and it's going to be imperative that we convince kind of some of our local legislators to say, hey, maybe we can come up with some city and county money, but can you get the state to match that? And then maybe we can do something nice that benefits everybody.
And on the HART board meeting last week, they talked about this. And I'll say that it seems like the board currently maybe has the stomach to discuss sales tax. It sounds like property tax is a bit of a non-starter with the current makeup of the board. But I want to hit on the point that even at the current service rate, with no additional dedicated revenue source, HART is like Thelma and Louise at the end of the movie with like Layla playing by Eric Clapton and the birds chirping before they drive off the cliff. That's where they're at 2028. So there has to be. We literally have 3 years to find some form of dedicated revenue source, or HART is going to be operating, in the red if they even can operate that way. And they have major expenses like trying to fix their heavy maintenance facility. We're trying to find ways to expand reliability. At the meeting, they discussed, I think, even if HART were to double its revenue, it would not be able to add any additional routes. It would only be at that rate, only able to expand on headways on the existing routes. So think about that. Think about how far behind we are. If even with double the revenue that HART generates, they don't necessarily have the money to expand services to where they were pre-COVID.
Well, how do you even expand service if the buses just sit in traffic anyway? Don't you need even more funding for dedicated bus lines and things like that? I mean, it's like, yeah, you could spend more money and have more buses, but if they all sit in traffic, what's the point? They need even further, right? They need more money to be able to have these dedicated lanes of transit.
It's like not drinking water and wondering why you're thirsty.
Yeah.
And that's why I look at buses more for shorter routes than longer ones, because to your point, for a bus really to be reliable, you need a dedicated lane and you need signal priority.
Right.
And that costs a lot of money too to build out that infrastructure to do that.
Yeah, I don't know. That sounds like a dangerous situation. All for transportation, we've talked about that, and we've said, maybe that set us back a generation or two. Do you think that could be on the table? Is there a political and public appetite to accept something like that in a few short years?
I think
it certainly would be a solution.
I think
right?
there is a public appetite. I think the challenge is going to be the makeup of the board. Anything like that has to go through the county commission. We have one county commissioner who's effectively a potted plant, another county commissioner who's been actively vocal anti-transit, anti-transportation. How do you find a way to navigate that in a way that gets something on the ballot? I think the HART board made it pretty clear on Monday's morning that they understand the ramifications of HART dying and how negatively that will impact working class people across this county. There has to be a solution. That solution has to be a dedicated revenue source. The question is where are we finding it and how? And I'm not sure that the the HART board maybe has the stomach. Does the county commission? I don't know. That's going to be a significant challenge. But I do think if you were to ask the average person,
sure,
100%. I think the average voter, maybe this is different out in East County, the further away you get from civilization. But I do truly believe that if you polled the vast majority of citizens in this county, you would find active support for some form of referendum. For
And so
public
you're saying the
transportation.
challenge there is even if the public were to vote for a referendum like that, we're in the same position we were back in 2018, where someone on the board, a couple people on the board, nix it, right, and get
certainly
it pushed out
possible.
again. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think a ballot initiative would probably be most preferable. Citizen driven, I should clarify. That to me would probably be the quickest given the political makeup of the board. It's also going to depend on what the general electorate looks like in the election that happens, and what the exact ballot initiative says. One of the problems we've had in the past is to fearmonger against the sales tax. In past elections, it's been like, they go out and tell all the people in East and South County, oh, they're not going to give you that money for roads. They're going to steal it and take it all for buses in the city, right? And that drives them crazy, right? The reason all for transportation was so great is people believed in the percentages, right? And and those folks purposefully, I think, made it more road centric, right? So that could be pitched to county voters to get on board with it. So it's doable. In most communities that have gone through this, it's failed, once or twice. So it's unfortunate that it passed here and then got judicially taken away. But I'm confident that the right ballot measure would pass here pretty significantly because, again, traffic here is very different than even 2018. It's a lot worse, right? And so people are feeling those effects and they want relief, whatever that may be, right? Whether it be roads or transit or whatever. But I think you're getting a little bit more synergy for people to say, I don't care what it is, like, let's take the money and let's try to do something.
Well, you mentioned 4 different revenue sources, right? These different options. Is there another option that would look something like a CRA or a special service district that could be around some sort of transit corridor that could collect revenue?
I think the CRA's capacity to do stuff that's related to transit are extremely limited statutorily because 173.3, slum and blight. It's difficult, I think, to massage the idea of investing in transportation or transportation-related assets as something that's related to slum and blight. I mean, we just talked about the Cape Coral situation where there was this perception, I guess, of like malfeasance from the CRA board. I would say it's really difficult to find dedicated revenue sources for something without finding. I mean, traditionally, this is taxes. I mean, this is where you have to find the way to take the money from somebody to put it to something else. And like traditionally in society, we've looked at taxes to do that. I
mean, at least in terms of HART, probably the simplest thing to do would be to raise the millage. Right, because you
have that gap, right? Right, 2.5 more mills you could go up.
Right, HART and PSTA are unique, right? In most places, right, the bus service is just funded by general revenue, right? I think that's something that that could be an easy conversation just in terms of fixing HART. In terms of the broader conversation, I think we probably have to go back to the sales tax issue just because
to really get some juice.
Well, because just politically, I think it's just better for people to stomach when it goes to the voters and the voters vote to raise it, right? It's too easy to fearmonger when the politicians decide to raise it. So usually if the voters vote for it themselves, then folks will solve.
I'll say one other potential dedicated source of revenue that I hope gets looked at. In the legislature, there's a bill, forgive me, I haven't been following its advancement, but in the House, it's supported by Ann Eskamani, and the Senate by Carlos Guillermo Smith, to talk about the possibility of allocating tourism tax revenues against public transportation. Currently, they're not allowed to do that. I don't know if that's going to pass in this legislature, but I think that's really an exemplary idea that we should be looking at, because particularly if you're talking about the streetcar, who better to help fund the streetcar than many of the tourists who utilize it currently for free? Why can't we use their taxes at local Airbnbs or hotels to help subsidize those costs? It seems like a great way to allocate dollars in a dedicated sense against something that they actually benefit from. Everybody wins.
Well, and to be clear, those 4 sources I talked about are kind of under current law. There could be other statutory changes that people could propose that would maybe provide some other kind of revenue sources. He mentions with the tourist tax, but I'd really like to see us as long as we're going to collect all this money from toll roads in this state, right? And we're not necessarily widening some of them in some places. I mean, I know we've talked about it here, but I think that's a good source of revenue to say, okay, we're going to take this and we're going to put it towards a greater good, right? Which would be to fund other transit investments. And that's kind of like what New York was trying to do, with the
congestion tax.
With the congestion tax. The MTA is basically they were going to take all that tax money and put it to fix like the subway system.
Is that what that was?
Yeah.
And why it seems like people are up in arms about that. I mean, why would that be? It seems like a great idea. Take the revenue
Listen,
from the
as
toll
someone who
and put
grew
it.
up in the shadow in New York City, if you're driving into the New York City, you either are truly, truly desperate or not in sound mind, because I cannot fathom why anyone wouldn't be using public transportation, of which there is a robust system to get into New York City. You take
And
the
it's
train
like
into Penn
$9
Station
to get in,
and from
right?
there to go anywhere. I mean, if you're driving in the city, again, you are either desperate or not of sound mind, because it is a miserable experience.
Well, the part of the whole discussion, and again, I look at that as just some of political overreach that is more about virtue signaling elsewhere than really the actual issue at hand. Working class people don't drive into Manhattan. And the problem is, if you drive into Manhattan, you have to park in Manhattan. And what is the cost to park a car in Manhattan for the day? It's not
An arm.
cheap. It's not cheap. And so, your working class people are riding public transit because that's the most efficient and both from a cost and time perspective way for them to do things. So hopefully that'll work itself out. But I use that as an example to say there's a way you can take toll revenue that goes towards cars and use it to invest in public transit. And the other thing is, in a place like New York, right, it has the function of almost like the dynamic pricing express lanes, because it deterred all these people from driving south of 60th in Manhattan. And so the roads got better. The travel times got better.
It makes a lot of sense. There's less of an incentive to drive in, thereby more people getting on public transit. The money used on the tolls goes towards better public transit. It's like it's a whole system that kind of supports itself.
Doesn't London do congestion tax as well, if I'm not mistaken?
Yes, that's.
I would imagine.
as does
I would
Paris, if I'm
imagine
not
any
mistaken.
world city has some sort of something like that.
You know, that thing that we're supposed to aspire to, but for some reason don't actually act on.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like it all kind of comes down to money and culture. The interesting thing about it's always going to come down to money, but the cultural component is what fascinates me. There's almost this like shift that is occurring here locally.
That we should stop just accepting bullshit.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I sure hope.
Accepting mid. What did you say in the very beginning?
I mean, like, as all the young kids are saying, just like accepting a whole bunch of really just bullshit, mediocrity.
Yeah.
Like, if we're a world-class city, let's do world-class shit. Let's build things here. Let's make a community that our kids and grandkids want to live in. I mean, that requires investment and vision and requires a capacity to say yes to things, as opposed to just throwing up our hands and saying, we can't do that here.
You brought up Europe and Vienna, Austria, and all these different places. Last October, we were in Switzerland, and some of the cable networks and the trolleys they have go like straight up the mountain. I mean, it's like they're using creativity to solve their problem. Why can't we do the same thing?
Why can't Tampa?
Yeah.
Well, and what's interesting too is that that was largely a function of economics. I mean, yes, European cities were older, but after World War II, a lot of those places have been bombed back into the Stone Age, and they didn't have any money. And gasoline in Europe, as you know, is very expensive, right? So from an economic perspective, it made a lot of sense for them to invest in their public transit, whereas here, gasoline historically was very cheap, automobiles were cheap comparatively, and the government had subsidized roadways. So, you can get it done. It's just a matter of how you prioritize where you spend your money.
And it almost seems like if this current trolley network wasn't put in 25 years ago, how would you even start? It's like these things have been proven to take so much time and energy and money to get done. I mean, boy, some of these things that could have been done 5-10 years ago, first of all, they're like twice as expensive now, but also just the angle and the will to accomplish this
all
stuff.
of the hair that is missing from Councilman Clendenin's head is because of the struggles to get the streetcar done. I mean, like, he has been so, candidly, our city right now is very fortunate to have a number of members of council that I think genuinely care about this issue, are investing in the realities of how we can make things move in the city. And it's going to require us to continue to elect folks who have vision, who have a capacity to look forward and not backwards. Man, we need to be planting orchards in this city, not rose gardens. We need things that we're harvesting fruit from 5, 10, 20 years from the future, instead of thinking about these, bullshit political cycles of what have you been able to achieve in 4 years. Like, we got to be stopping thinking about these 4-year cycles and start thinking about what is Tampa going to look like in 2045.
Thinking about things generationally,
100%,
decades in the making.
100%.
Just like they've done with, there's a lot of projects in this region that you can look at that were thought of that way. The best example is the Tampa airport. that spoke design in the late 1960s was novel. People
Joe
were like,
Lopano
what the hell is this?
I mean,
But
him and that team are
can you
geniuses.
imagine if they did not build it that way when they had the opportunity to do that? I mean, we would be looking at some mismatched, Atlanta International built piecemeal thing. Why do we have the best airport in the world? That's because it wasn't built yesterday.
100%.
It's because it was thought of and designed in the late 60s. Intentionally. Yes, exactly.
I mean, like, I think
plan for the future.
It's weird. I think that's maybe a really good word to examine one of these issues, these cultural issues and political issues within our community. Intentionality. Are things being done with intentionality? Are they being looked at in a way where, like, we're doing this for this way, for this reason, because it benefits the community because of X, Y, and Z?
I think too, as a broader function.
Wow, this is wild going back in time.
So sorry to cut you off, Hoyt. Google Maps can go back to 1985 now. That's actually insane.
It's super blurry though.
It's super blurry, but that's super cool.
Oh,
Wow.
what's funny is there's like a historical aerials website, and it's like, not perfect, but like you can go back to like the 30s and 50s and look at some of these aerials.
I'm
Tampa.
7 years old at this point.
That's amazing how
Yeah.
you can go back like that.
Yeah. But I think too, as we change the culture in how we think about
The old
things.
golf course where International Mall was.
Oh yeah, that's right. We have to change the culture too about like not scolding people so much. Like too often it's like I have this idea and that makes this person like evil or bad, right? And I think we got to shift the narrative a little bit to think about ways that things can benefit everybody instead of you see this a lot in the some of the folks in the pro transit community. I mean, man,
passionate.
if not passionate, but it's like if you do one thing wrong. Right, like they're on you
I
like white on
I would
rice.
use zealous.
Like they're dogging you on Facebook. They're calling you a sellout. Like they're just very critical unless you fit this very rigid ideology. And I'd like to see a shift from that a little bit to trying to find ways that we all can work together and live cohesively together in our own lifestyles and habitats.
Well, I would even argue that those people are probably wrong. You still need the highways. You still need the adequate network around the urban core that can service the people that don't live in the city. It's not, to me, it's not, I'm agreeing, like it's not black and white. It's not a binary situation. You do need both. You just need to be accepting of the fact that we can have both. It doesn't have to be one way.
That's right. And that's on us to communicate that as such too.
Yeah, I think part of the problem with so much of the pro-transit communication is, to Hoyt's point, it's been a lot of kind of like dogmatic, condescending, like talking down to folks who don't necessarily agree. And I will admit I probably participate in some of this. But I think simultaneously we do have to find ways to, if not convince people, at least detail the efficacy of why our ideas we think have merit. And you know what? Not everyone's going to agree, but we got to at least be able to like contextualize for folks why this is a good idea, why it's a good idea for working class people who live on Route 1 to be able to only need one car to get to work. We got to be able to sell that idea to people in a way that people can connect to the tangible value of it.
Frankly,
my aunt doesn't need to, take a car to get to the grocery store anymore. That's good for her. Like,
people could take this conversation as zealous, right? In one direction. But I also think that we all are kind of vying for the same thing. Like we all want an awesome community that works for everyone. Safe, effective, adequate infrastructure. We don't want to sit in traffic all day. Like no one wants some of these negative externalities we've talked about. There's a way to meet the middle. There really is.
Well, I think too, having done the city council campaign, that's one thing that's important when you go out and you knock doors and you talk to people, right? When you're trying to win votes, you're not usually going out there and like scolding them for not supporting what you want. You're listening, right? You're having dialogue with them, right? You're trying to find areas where you agree, right? And that's a conversation I think we can take broadly, both for the folks that are in elected office, but also our community leaders, right? When we're building support for projects, right? Some of the pro transit folks make the same mistakes that the Chamber of Commerce types make, because they're only thinking about their lane. They're not thinking about what benefits the other person that's on the opposite side of them.
And I think to so much of what our experience was on that 23 campaign is it really is the art of meeting people where they're at and having those conversations in the threshold of doorways, or if you're lucky to be invited in someone's living room, and genuinely not just listening to what they say, but trying to imbibe it in a way that informs your own philosophy on things.
Right.
Because these are the folks that live in this community. They have a knowledge about kind of what their expectations and desires are, and you got to let that inform you, as opposed to coming into these communities with like preconceived ideas and notions. You got to be willing to learn from folks about what their experiences are in their communities. And I think so much of knocking 2,500 doors across District 6 in 23 was a learning experience and what the different communities in Tampa need, what folks, you know, are looking for their futures and the future of this community, like meeting them where they're at and listening.
People are surprisingly open-minded when they feel like you've listened to them and they feel like they've been heard. You're not going to get 100% agreement on things, but you know, the national media, for example, there's a lot of things, there are these trigger words that just kind of shut down the dialogue and people just shut it off, right? And, you know, for all we hear in the national media about, you know, all the fighting, and obviously there are serious issues we have to deal with and serious disagreements, but I think what was good to see about a lot of that is there's still so much humanity and common nicety and goodness when you go out and you just talk to people one-on-one, even people that you don't know. That was one of the things I really took away from it, because you know, you're kind of wondering, like, God, if I go knock some random person's door, am I going to get nuked, right, for showing up? And at least with city politics, right, which are still kind of nonpartisan, man, people wanted to talk to you.
Well, that's a whole other issue that I hope doesn't infect us. And I think it's infected a lot of discussions related to some of these things that we all want, we're trying to accomplish, where it does become binary. And this like circus-esque Republican versus Democrat thing that's occurred at the national level has infected us at a local level to where we're a little bit gridlocked in some ways. And people are not willing to just come to the table and be like, what do you want? What do you want? Let's listen to each other. Let's figure out solutions. It's more like this or that.
I feel like some of that beautifully melts away, though, when you meet someone at their door.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll say, I think in our experience, and I don't want to speak for you, but I'll say, I think in my experience, at least, when you meet people at their door, I think traditionally, in my experience, there's a willingness to sort of let a lot of that gridlock go by the wayside, because it's not a stranger on Facebook. I'm a person. I'm right in front of you. You know, we live in the same community. Maybe we have different wants and needs and different life experiences, but we all share this town.
Right.
And I think you really get to see the pleasure in watching people disregard that partisan bullshit and think about themselves and how they fit into this community and the kind of community that they want to see.
Well, and part of the reason I am totally against moving the council elections to align with the mid-year or the presidential year is because then city politics will get caught up in all that. And people, you know, city council people don't have any control over national issues, right? But they'll be forced to take stands on national issues that have nothing to do with the job they're elected to perform and will deteriorate the dialogue. One thing that is nice about city elections is, you know, I mean, yeah, people would ask me sometimes what my partisan affiliation is, and of course I'm a Democrat, but ultimately that's a nonpartisan race, and it, you know, in performance it's nonpartisan, and it doesn't. You can see the difference even with the county, right? The county, because it's a partisan election, gets caught up. I mean, it's like the fluoride nonsense,
oh, man,
right? Like,
I was waiting for it.
We
didn't hit my over under.
That's just the quickest one that came to mind. Of it forces these national issues down to the local level because you've got the R versus D, where I think thankfully at the city level, we've still been able to avoid that. And there's still good dialogue that doesn't force you to take sides in these different camps and then defend issues that really have nothing to do with the job you're
in these
performing.
deep social issues that might not have a right answer. Something like abortion.
I don't want Tampa City Council weighing in on some of these issues. It's focus
they
on
have
land
a
use and the
job to
budget.
do. A land use, the budget, the sidewalks, everything we've talked about today is important for city government, not those social issues. Those have a time and a place, and they're very important, but not in city government. If city government's distracted by it, we'll never get done what we've talked about today.
To this council's credit, they actually passed a motion, I think in 23 or 24, that basically makes it so city business is allocated exclusively city business. They're not weighing in anymore on these like resolutions or commendations dealing with stuff that are outside of city purview. Because, I mean, as anybody who watches city council knows, and I have watched far too much city council, there's enough there that they don't need to start interjecting national politics and issues into an already crammed agenda. They're trying to fit like 30 people in a sardine can. We don't need to, you know, trying to turn this there's an oil tanker around in a kiddie pool was probably not the best idea.
Sheesh. Well, listen, guys, thanks for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much for having
We've
me.
been going over 2 hours. This has been awesome. We could probably go all day. I'll have to have you guys on again. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I guess we can do our Cory Booker impersonation on the next one, right?
Yeah. How long did he go for? Was it
5 hours? I
How
think.
crazy is that? 25 hours.
I'm gonna bring like Dostoevsky, and we're just gonna read it here. We're just gonna sit at the desk and just
Start
flip
off
through
with some coffee,
Russian
and end with some beer.
existentialism.
We'll do a
If
marathon.
you're doing that, remind me. I definitely won't be on that.
Well, listen, thank you again,
Oh
guys.
man,
I
thank y'all so
appreciate
much
it.
for having
All
us.
right.
We really love
Thank
being
you for
here.
having us.
Beautiful. All righty. Bye,
Appreciate
everybody.
y'all.